בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל, אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל, שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל, לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1010 of the news. And today is very historic. Aleppo has fallen to rebel forces, and Russia suffered a massive defeat in Syria. Also, we're seeing massive attacks on Russian targets, and also the Russian economy is still in a free fall. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we are going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as major developments have been happening both inside the Middle East and Eastern Europe over the past 48 hours that is showing us that the Russian Federation is not only on the back foot in Europe, but also inside of the Middle East as well, as the only Russian-backed regime inside the entirety of the region appears to be collapsing as of today, and as of the information that we were able to get just over the past few hours, as shocking information has come out that the Syrian Salvation Government, otherwise known as the SSG, based in Idlib, has been able to take the entirety of the city of Aleppo in less than 72 hours from the beginning of their ground offensive. The quickest that Aleppo has ever been captured by any side in the Syrian civil war so far, and apparently such a blow to the Syrian central government that we have already heard and seen from Russian government reports that Bashar Al-Asad, the dictator of the Russian-backed Syrian regime inside the country, has already fled to Moscow at this moment with his family and is currently inside of the Four Seasons Hotel inside of Moscow. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that there are supposed rumors that the Syrian Free Army inside of the Aleppo garrison region may begin an offensive against the Assad regime as well inside of the desert near to the area of the Aleppo garrison perimeter. And we've also been able to hear that U.S. Air Forces have been conducting bombardments of Syrian regime forces around the area of Deir ez-Zor on the southern side of the Euphrates River in an attempt to ensure that the Syrian Democratic Forces may have a very good offensive window to begin their own push against Syrian-backed forces or Assad-backed forces that are on the southern side of the Euphrates River. It appears that at the moment a major death knell may be delivered to the only Russian influence in the entirety of the Middle East, as the Bashar Al-Assad regime inside of Syria is the only government that has any kind of major military or monetary backing of the Russian Federation. It is such a serious blow, at least at the moment from what we're seeing, that the Russian Federation is now pledging more military support to the Syrian government, although their ailing army and logistical supplies are most likely stretched to their absolute limit fighting the war in Ukraine. And we've also even heard that the Islamic Republic of Iran may start to send elements of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to fight on the side of Bashar al-Assad to ensure that a Russian or Axis-aligned power is able to remain in the region to allow more supplies and arms to be transported into other states such as Lebanon or maybe even the Gaza Strip through the state of Syria under the control of Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, while the Russians have been getting absolutely plastered, and we'll be showing you all the footage of that here in a second, around the area of Aleppo, they are also getting plastered inside of their own occupied territories in Ukraine today as well, as we have been able to hear of a major Ukrainian strike happening near to the area of Sevastopol, and according to our information at the moment, it appears that the Ukrainians were able to destroy another incredibly expensive S-400 surface-to-air missile defense system. Once again, a major blow to the Russian Federation's air defense abilities and the remaining air defense that has been inside of Crimea for the past 6 to 8 months. We've also been able to hear that Russian air defense concerns are reaching an absolute fever pitch as a Russian civil aircraft, an Antonov 2, was shot at today over Salavat, which was just attacked about 2 days ago by a drone that slammed into an oil refinery at Salavat, and they almost ended up killing the pilot and crew that was on board the Antonov 2, and it landed with a great deal of damage, showing that the Russian Federation is going absolutely insane, trying to deal with the large amount of Ukrainian drones that continue to fly through their airspace without being intercepted or shot down at any point. Meanwhile, inside of the Rostov-on-Don region, we've also been able to hear of another major Ukrainian attack against the Russian usable fuel depot just north of Kamensk-Shetinsky, which is once again causing irreparable damage to the Russian supply chain, helping them to continue to fight the war and keep their economy alive, although it's also appearing to be on the verge of collapse as well. Meanwhile, along the entirety of the front lines in Ukraine, we have also been seeing that the Russian Federation has continued to take high losses in practically all offensives that they're still attempting to conduct at this moment, and it also appears that they're making no frontline advances as well. It is an absolutely insane amount of news that we've been able to get today, and this is just the small synopsis that we have so far. There is loads of stuff.
It seems like Russia's taking big fat L's pretty much everywhere around the world at this point. It's like if they're taking L's in the Middle East, they're taking them in Ukraine, they're taking them in their own home country. At this point, it looks like everybody's taking a shot at Russia because they're sensing weakness.
It really is the case. It appears that everyone is starting to smell the blood in the water with the Russians, as it looks as though they are so weak they really can't stand up anywhere against anyone for this matter. And so it seems as though everyone's trying to take advantage of that at this moment. And what's even crazier, I have to let y'all know this, because this is one of the few days ever in channel history where I've had to cut out a news segment. We have completely cut out the Georgian unrest segment from tonight. We have a lot of information about it on Twitter, on our Twitter account, but I had to cut it out of our news stream tonight because we have literally so much to cover from just the Middle East and also inside of Ukraine that covering the Georgian civil unrest that's been created because of the Georgian Dreams election landslide that was most likely caused through some form of a voter fraud by the Russian Federation cannot even be covered. We will have to save that for some other day when we are able to have the time to cover it. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into the major breaking news of the night, which is the crushing blow that has happened to Russian and Syrian forces at the city of Aleppo. Aleppo is a city that's been known for a little while, at least in the American conscience, about 8 years ago when someone who was running for president said, what the hell is even Aleppo? And then also because it was one of the most major battlefields of the entirety of the Syrian civil war, up until very recently when it became the most major battlefield for a second time. Aleppo is one of the largest cities inside of Syria. I believe, if I'm correct, it is the second or third largest city inside of the Republic of Syria, or at least originally what was the Republic of Syria. Up until recently, from about 2017 and up until just today, the city of Aleppo was under the control of the Bashar Al-Assad regime. And to give you all a little bit of a quick background and catch you all up to speed here on what we're talking about, we are talking about the ongoing Syrian civil war. The Syrian civil war started back in 2011, in the middle of the Arab Spring. The the Middle Eastern world is a very interesting one to try and explain, because the honest truth is that it's been in a state of flux for really about the past 100 or so years. Exactly, it's about exactly 100 years at this point, since the destruction of the Islamic Caliphate inside of the Ottoman Empire. With the destruction of the Caliphate at the hands of Ataturk, also called the father of the Turks and the creator of the modern-day Republic of Turkey, the Islamic world fell into a cultural free fall and didn't really understand what they were any longer, considering that there was not any direct guidance on what this area of the world would look like and what kind of a cultural trend would exist into the future. And this has always led the largely Middle Eastern or Islamic world through different kinds of fads over time. The original fad was some form of a semi-capitalist socialist sort of a state, which we saw exist in pretty much every single country in the Middle East during the 1950s and on up until about the late 1970s. Those generally were states that appeared to be largely neutral. They were not really pro-American or pro-Soviet, but nevertheless, they would get a large amount of military and monetary support from both sides, including the United States of America and the Soviet Union. This is why you can always see in a lot of the older inventories of weapons that existed during the 90s and early 2000s, pretty much every single Middle Eastern country had some sort of an eclectic mix of both Soviet and Western weaponry that they were using in their armed forces. There were a few outliers, however, of governments that were clearly British and American aligned, that being Persia, which is now the modern-day Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is still strongly American and Western aligned. Transjordan, nowadays called the Kingdom of Jordan, was also a Western aligned country as well, and so more so fell under a normal sort of a capitalist sort of an economic system than a semi-socialist system. Nevertheless, with the bringing about of new times in the late 1970s, came forward a radical Islamism, which was the new fad that took over the Middle East. The general idea was that the creation of different forms of Islamic states that would largely implement Sharia law was actually the new direction for this area of the world. And a lot of countries would end up bringing forward those sorts of governments, such as the Ba'athist government of Iraq under Saddam Hussein, which largely followed some sort of a more traditionalist viewpoint, although it wasn't extremely traditional. The Islamic Republic of Iran is probably the most severe example, and the Syrians kind of walked the line. Interestingly enough, the Syrian government actually was more so still leaning towards the original semi-socialist capitalist sort of a model that had been going on for decades at that point, and largely kept with that up until the modern day. But up near the end of the 2000s and the beginning of the 2010s came this sort of a question once again in the Middle Eastern world, or the Islamic world, in what is the future going to look like. And a lot of people in the Middle East at pretty much the exact same time, and every single country in the region, came up with a concept that everything that they had been doing up to this point was wrong. Every single thing, every single government was corrupt, it was inept, it had to be torn down and pretty much rebuilt from the ground up, and therefore, every single country pretty much in the Middle East at the same time went into what was called the Arab Spring. And there was a load of different factions that would come out of this, but the country that is still gripped with the terrors of the Arab Spring, where pretty much the entirety of the Middle East went up in flames in a single month, is Syria. Syria still lives in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, as the people of Syria were absolutely tired of the nepotism, the corruption, and the general kind of dictatorship that Bashar Al-Assad and the Assad family had continued to reign over Syria for decades at this point. And due to a large amount of mistreatment by the Syrian government due to the unhappiness of the Syrian people during the Arab Spring and the protests that were leading up to it, that actually led to the Syrian civil war itself, which split the country into two. Later on, during the time of about 2014 to 2018, there was another third contender that joined into the region that was a serious threat not only to Western forces such as the Syrian Democratic Forces, which we will show you all here in a second, but also the Assad regime as well, which was the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, also called the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, which is called ISIL. But nevertheless, the United States then declared the war on terror would extend onto this group, and due to U.S., SDF, and Bashar Al-Assad Syrian and Russian actions, the ISIS groups were largely destroyed inside the Middle East, and the front line that y'all see right here on the map was created that's pretty much persisted to this very day. However, there is a couple of factions that still exist in this area, and one that we didn't even map that we have to talk about in this conflict for everyone to get a pretty good understanding of where we're going to be at today, because we are talking about a conflict that has been going on the entire time we've been covering news, and we've never really given you all a great synopsis of what this is, because it's never really mattered as far as our news coverage is concerned. But nevertheless, around the time of 2017 to 2018, when ISIS was being destroyed inside of Syria, there was a new group that emerged just outside of the area of Idlib, the city of Idlib, called the Syrian Salvation Government. The Syrian Salvation Government is largely a Islamic autocratic state that implements Sharia law that has gone to war with literally everyone around them. They are anti-Assad and therefore largely aligned in the anti-Russian and therefore Western interests, but at the same time, not really by a lot. They have fought the Turks when they moved in to create a security zone inside of northern Syria. They have fought the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are our forces that we back up in the region and largely support. They, at some times when the Free Syrian Army was in this area, fought the Free Syrian Army, which is currently under U.S. protection at Entente, and they've also fought the Assad government as well. They have literally fought everyone that surrounds them, and have been an incredibly weird group for that reason. They don't really fall in the framework of being pro-Axis or pro-Western. They're really just out there fighting anyone and everyone they can get their hands on, which is an incredibly kind of a bizarre thing. But nevertheless, today, well, actually 3 days ago, was the day that apparently the Syrian Salvation Government, the SSG as we'll call them from this point forward, had enough and started a brand new offensive on the city of Aleppo. Aleppo is one of the most major battlefields inside of Syria, and back in the day, this city was absolutely ravaged by conflict as the Syrian Democratic Forces, which were the major holders at the time, well, actually a little bit afterwards, but ISIS was the main holder of Aleppo at the time. The Russians and the Assad government went in and through a very prolonged and costly battle ended up retaking the city of Aleppo. The Syrian Democratic Forces have always been on the eastern outskirts, but since 2018 and onwards, the SSG has also been on the western outskirts of Aleppo, meaning that up until recently, Aleppo was pretty much surrounded on three sides by, on the western side, the SSG, the northern side, the Turks, and on the eastern side, the SDF, meaning that the city was literally besieged on three sides by three different forces. Nevertheless, 3 days ago, the SSG took on offensive actions against the city of Aleppo to retake it under their control, and the results were shocking. Absolutely mind-blowing, to be entirely honest with y'all, because the old Battle of Aleppo, the first Battle of Aleppo, took about 8 months to a year to complete for the Russians and the Syrians. The SSG came in and cleared out the city in 3 days, 72 hours. At this very moment that we're on stream right now, it was about 4 hours ago, the SSG has declared complete control of the city of Aleppo, and according to additional information, the Syrian forces south of Aleppo are completely destroyed, and there's absolutely nothing there right now, stopping the SSG from advancing even further on south and towards the city of Hama or even other cities that would be farther south inside of Syria.
But isn't it wild how quickly this happened? Like, honestly, like we don't really follow Syrian news that closely. It's not really a hotspot right now, but this was a very sudden ambush into Aleppo because, like the enforcer said, this has only been going on for a couple of days now, and already, apparently they've caught the Assad regime by surprise as well. They weren't ready either, and the Russians weren't ready, obviously, because they fled the area. So this was shocking all the way around. For them to take that city that fast, that was a well-kitted and well-maneuvered situation here to be able to go into Aleppo and take it, considering it took so long before for there to be a failed attempt, basically. So this is a hell of a situation.
It's absolutely crazy to see, to be entirely honest, and the absolute scale of which this offensive has been in is something that I cannot even say enough has been insane. Aleppo is a huge city. To get y'all a little bit of information about the city of Aleppo, at least pre-war, let me bring y'all over here to a little Wikipedia article, so that way we can make sure to get y'all an idea of how big the city really is. The population in 2021 is 2.1 million yearly. This city is about the size, I believe, of Kharkiv. I think it actually is bigger than the city of Kharkiv. So let me find that information really quickly, and let me make sure to compare the two. So actually, interestingly enough, y'all are going to be shocked by this. Aleppo is 2 times the size of Kharkiv. This would actually be about the size of Kyiv, the city is at least. And so this is one of the biggest cities in the area. The scale of this thing is unimaginable. To really put this
is it just like the square miles of the area, or is it the population that makes it larger than Kharkiv?
The population that makes it larger. I believe the square mileage is also larger as well, just because the population density factor is considered in. But Aleppo is an absolutely massive city. It's huge, and it really is one that is absolutely shocking to think it was taken in 72 hours. To remind you all of what the war in Ukraine has looked like, at least recently, to give you all an idea of how quickly this offensive victory has been achieved by the SSG, Kharkiv was besieged for around an entire month. It's a city half the size, at least in population, yet the Russians were never able to actually make it into the city, engage in any kind of fighting that would see them win the city over. It was impossible for the Russians to do it. Kyiv was also besieged, but for a much shorter time, really only around a week or a week and a half. But even at that point, the Ukrainians were able to hold the Russians off at the city's outskirts in the urban fighting at Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin, and were able to counterattack them and push them out of the area in about the span of 2 weeks. This is showing us that the offensive actions that were conducted today at Aleppo, or really over the past 3 days at Aleppo, are either so lightning fast and well coordinated that there was no way for anyone to mount an effective defense of the city, the Russians or the Assad regime, or it is showing us the alternative, that the Russian and Assad regime is so bloated and corrupt at this point that even a half-baked offensive by the SSG could completely break their forces and lead them into an uncontrollable rout out of the city, pretty much giving it up without a fight. Either way, the picture is horrendous for Russian forces that are currently in the area at the moment. And we were able to get loads of video and picture evidence showing what the battle has transpired like, really more so the march into the city and what it looks like, and then the capture of the city in its entirety. So starting off with some of their first clips, we were able to see that earlier on today, some of the SSG forces were already moving into Aleppo. We can see some of them out there, and it looks like they're trying to take down some sort of a poster of a sort.
It looks like a beautiful picture of Bashir on the wall they're trying to rip down.
Yeah, it looks like Bashir is the doctor from Deep Space Nine, but Bashar Al-Assad is the dictator of Syria. But we can also see them moving in here on pickup trucks as well. It looks like this one is actually a technical. Actually, it looks like 2 of them are technicals with some sort of a heavy machine gun on board. But this one up front is quite literally just a pickup truck. But nevertheless, we can see that the SSG forces were moving in rapidly earlier on in the day. And from what we understand, they largely moved in along the M5 highway as well as Highway 60 into Aleppo, pretty much from its southwestern side, which was a pretty interesting way to advance, because by doing so, they were able to wrap around the southern side of the city, at least on Highway 5 down here, and pretty much start to make it appear to the Russian and Syrian forces in Aleppo that they were about to be encircled and completely surrounded not before long. This may have been the reason why the Russian and Syrian forces broke so quickly and then routed from the city about as quickly as possible. Nevertheless, in the next clip, we did also get to see that the SSG immediately began to release prisoners from Assad-controlled prisons inside of Aleppo in this video right here.
I wonder what the strategy was with this to let the prisoners out. Like, what are they hoping? They're going to join the resistance or something?
I'm not really sure. I think it's just to make a statement, because a lot of these guys, from what we know, may be political prisoners just because they were not a fan of the Assad regime. They were put into prison, and so they may be releasing them to try and get some favor with the public, at least in Aleppo, and give them the idea that the SSG are liberators, although in a second we'll explain they might not really be the liberators Aleppo's looking for. Nevertheless, moving on from that, we were able to see that SSG forces were able to uncover weapons caches that were literally left by the Russians and the Syrians in their quick retreat from the city. Man pads, actually. These appear to be igloos. And this guy's just screaming.
It's a man pad, did you hear it? It's a man pad.
It's a man pad, you put a man on it. Your stick's not even on the ground, man. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we also get to see them tearing down pictures of Assad and Putin, which are best friends forever.
Oh, yeah. BFFs for life.
And that's the end of that clip, but still it doesn't look like they're really a big fan of Putin or Assad, which is at least a good thing, at least at the moment. But we also got to see that the police HQ had been captured in the city as well, and it appeared that they were stopping to take some photos inside the police headquarters.
Allahu Akbar. Allahumma lak alhamd. Allah yataqabbal minnak ya Ibn Ammar.
It's actually kind of nice.
I love it how like the first thing that all these like rebel groups love to do, and also when any like country in the Middle East is taken over or something happens, the first thing they do is go find the nearest desk in an office building or a government building, go sit in it and take a picture. That's the first thing they got to do is go take a photo there.
Dude, every time they do it, man, it's like they sit behind the desk, and if we were able to speak Arabic, I bet you, man, they're saying something like, "Man, I always wanted to be a bureaucrat," or something like that. It's like, why do they always want to be behind the desks?
It always looks like, like it's a picture of like take your son to work day or something like that. Like they just sat behind the desk like, oh, look, my son's going to go sit here and pretend like he's working at the desk. They don't even look like they belong there, but they're like, oh, here we are. We're at the desk.
Man, this guy's like, man, I've been fighting and killing for like 6 years to get behind a desk and do paperwork all day. This is incredible. Yes, I love it. It's like, no, you're not. Like, it's like, go ask the guys in the Taliban when they finally retook Afghanistan if they like the bureaucracy, because they've apparently hated, like, from what everyone's saying, they fought for like 20 years to get the country back, and then they're like, oh, we don't really want to run it though. It's like, well, what were y'all fighting for if y'all didn't want to run it? But anyways,
Allah yataqabbal minnak ya Ibn Ammar. Allahumma lak alhamd.
Still a pretty nice
though.
office.
Like that's a fine office. Like nice wood on the walls, a map, and good stuff. Look, they even got a break room over there.
Dude, look, they got a kitchen and everything.
Yeah, look at that.
What the hell, dude? Look at that. They got like a full service kitchen up there. What's Ramsey doing up here?
Huh, that's not such a great room there, but the other ones were nice.
Well, the police chief's room was pretty freaking nice, but the rest of them, it kind of went down in quality the further away you got from the chief of police office. But moving on into the next clips that we did get from Aleppo, and let me make sure that we've caught up with everything else so far, and we have, we were also able to see that just tonight, fireworks were being set off in the city by the locals as they have been liberated from the Assad regime as well as the Russians.
There's always got to be somebody on a loudspeaker somewhere. Like, you got to add that chaos in with those big booms and explosions, man. You got to have somebody going, wamba, wamba. It's like, dude, come on.
Man, that guy's on the intercom. He's going,
if you have a white Tacoma, that is a white Tacoma, come and get your Tacoma. It's in front of the celebratory square. Come and get your Tacoma, whoever has...
And then there's one guy on the car, he's like, oh crap, man, I get the keys. Hang on, man, I'll go get it. Like,
Wait a minute, bro. Like, literally everybody drive Tacoma here. It's like, can you be more specific?
Man, dude, you just look out there, and it's all Toyota Tacomas. There's just nothing else but freaking Toyota Tacomas out there. All white, and some of them maybe with plumbing insignia on the side. But moving on from that and into our last clips, which really do show us that they have taken the entirety of Aleppo, y'all have to remember, at least with our offensive map over the past 24 hours, which is what we're covering, the SSG forces advanced up the M5 into Aleppo itself. Now, that would let us know that to really gauge whether they've taken the whole city or not, they had to have made it to the eastern side of the city somewhere. And so one of the major elements that's in the eastern side of the city, one of the major landmarks that everyone would be able to know, at least easily, would be the Aleppo Citadel. The Aleppo Citadel, interesting enough, is actually from about the 14th century and is an incredibly large fortress that pretty much dominates the entire skyline of Aleppo and has existed here for hundreds of years. It's a pretty formidable site and it actually is a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well for its historical value and significance, but nevertheless, this is really one of the most important buildings that you would be able to get to and capture inside of Aleppo if you were advancing from the west to confirm that you pretty much controlled the city from end to end, from quite literally west to east or east to west, either way around. And we were able to get pictures just a little while ago showing that they were in control of this citadel right here in the pictures. And some of y'all are going, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look like they're in control of it. It just looks like you showed us another picture. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Let's go to the actual picture and video evidence and the proof behind this showing that they actually were able to make it. And there they are, sitting right in front of the Aleppo Citadel's entrance, taking a picture. And it looks as though they're comfortable enough to get in a group that there isn't really any active fighting going on in the general area, which is showing us that there are no Assad or Russian forces Further east, in the remainder of the town, or the few suburbs that would be left under control, they're entirely gone. From what we know at this moment, just 4 hours ago, they took control of the entirety of Aleppo and are now apparently moving southbound near the Aleppo International Airport and down the roads towards Al-Wadihi, and maybe advancing further south and towards the area of the major city of Hama. Although that's so far south that would never be a major offensive target, at least at the moment. But it does seem as though, from all of the picture and video evidence we have at the time, the Russians and the Syrians' key defensive fortress, the Iraq of the North, as some would call it, considering that they fought and bled to take this town initially, fell in 3 days. It's showing that the Syrian government and the Russians do not have the combat power or effective ability to even stop a minor group's rise to take the second biggest city in Syria. And it seems as though a lot of people are starting to believe that there may be some greater or larger actions happening outside of the SSG, maybe with the SSF, at the SDF or the SFA, which is the Syrian Free Army, that may see the remainder of Syria liberated from the Assad regime. But Matthew, what are people actually thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that rebels will take more of Syria, or do you think that maybe the Russians will end up counterattacking and pushing the SSG out of Aleppo at some point in the future? And what is everyone thinking about that?
All right, so it looks like, based on the question here, and once again, the question says, Syrian rebels have seized Aleppo, one of the largest cities in Syria, after Russian forces fled from the area, and the big question is, what is going to happen next? So 76% of the audience said the rebels will take more of Syria on their own, while 8% said someone else will probably end up entering the war, and 6% said Russia will retake the territory and push the rebels back out. And I'm actually with the 76%. I think the rebels will end up taking more of Syria because the fact that Aleppo was taken so fast, that indicates the resistance by the Assad regime is not very strong. And also the Russians are not opposing the rebels either very much. So it looks like they will take more ground. The question is, how soon is that going to be? And we really don't know just yet because we really don't know where the rebels would go next. We have some ideas, but no certainties right now of where they're going to try to go next. So also keep in mind, there is the possibility that the Turkish might send in their Turkish-backed rebel forces, their version of rebel forces, to basically mobilize them and start causing chaos as well. There's that possibility. So there are other factions in Syria. There's actually many rebel factions which could get involved in this chaos and decide to push the Assad regime out. And one thing they all have in common is they do not like Assad. At least most of them don't, and they want to get rid of him. So this could be the beginning of the end for the Assad regime, and we could be seeing that right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say, from what I'm seeing as well, I would have to be with the 76%. I do believe that the rebels will be taking more of Syria. And really calling them rebels, at least in some instances, that is an appropriate term. And others, it really isn't. For example, with the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, they're a more unified sort of a force than you would see with, say, the real rebels, which are the SSG. But still, nevertheless, regardless, we are going to call all of the anti-Assad factions rebels just for the sake of brevity. And I do believe that the rebels will be able to take more ground. Right now, what this is showing is that Aleppo, and I want to make this very clear because I had to research this just a second ago, Aleppo was the largest city in Syria up until right before the Arab Spring, when Damascus's population surpassed Aleppo's just by a hair. So technically, Aleppo is really the largest city in Syria, but by number, it is just slightly smaller than Damascus. And considering how important the population centers are for their industrial abilities, the manpower that a government's able to pull from, the loss of Aleppo for the Syrians is a death knell, because they have now lost one of the largest population centers, probably one of the largest industrial centers as well, in just 3 days. This is showing us that the Syrian forces, the Syrian-backed, the Assad-aligned forces inside of Syria are probably so weak at this point, and with such little support and backing, that they won't really be able to stop the rolling forward of really any group at this point that may be trying to advance deeper into Syria and take the remainder of the country from the Assad regime. And once again, there are a lot of people who really would like to see that happen. There's at least 3 at the moment. There is the Syrian Salvation Government that just took over Aleppo. There's the Syrian Democratic Forces, which we back and support inside of western Syria, north of the Euphrates River. And then there's also the Syrian Free Army down here at the At-Tanf garrison that is under U.S. control, that is also supposedly going to be advancing as well. From what we've heard, the Turks also have a great deal of relations with the Syrian Free Army, which is currently at the Atomf garrison, and from what we're hearing, they may start to advance and take ground inside of this area of Syria. And that actually would be, shockingly enough, a lot easier than expected, because a large area around the Atomf garrison is literally uninhabited desert. So it's literally just a matter of driving to be able to start taking more territory in this area. So it would be assumed that they would be able to take territory in this area fairly rapidly, at least in the short time, until they start reaching larger population centers. Nevertheless, it is fairly certain at this point that multiple different factions may end up trying to advance in these areas here in the future, but it appears that there's not really a lot of faith, even on the Russian and Syrian side, that the Syrian government, or really the Assad regime in Syria, will be able to survive, as shocking news came out just 2 hours ago that Bashar Al-Asad and his entire family have fled Syria and have ended up at the Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow. That is according to a direct statement from Russian news, as they did state that Assad arrived in the Kremlin, where he is currently staying. In addition to him, members of his family are also in Moscow, staying with him at the Four Seasons Hotel on Khotny Riyadh Street inside of Moscow City, showing us that
they say that Assad is not a materialistic man, but the Four Seasons is quite a nice and expensive hotel for him to be staying at, to be so humble.
It really is, you know. It's like, I'm a simple man, you know. I only get the cheapest of watches, a Rolex, of course, and I only stay in the simplest of hotels. A Four Seasons might suffice. It's like, you know, it's like, that's a little interesting, but nevertheless, it is interesting on another level to note that they immediately left Syria. Now, we have to keep this in mind, because there is a lot of parallels here to something else that happened a little while ago, which we can talk about and brush up on a little bit, which was the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Many people know this now in hindsight. Many people didn't know this up till the point, unless if you were talking to people who had been over in Afghanistan on the ground. But the U.S.-backed Afghan government was an incredibly weak government without a large deal of public support. No one in Afghanistan really was a big fan of the American-created government in Afghanistan, generally because its control only was around the direct vicinity of Kabul, and really didn't expand anywhere else into the mountainous regions north into the Hindu Kush, or the more so, let me think. When the world is just, it largely is just the Hindu Kush. That's really the best way to explain it, because it's a part of the larger mountain range. But it didn't really extend any further north into the Hindu Kush, where a lot of the Taliban were largely hiding out. And it really didn't expand over into the deserts and lowlands of Afghanistan either, because the central government was that weak. And there really is no way to create an Afghan government in that area that was going to have a lot of public support in the first place. So when U.S. forces started withdrawal, of course, the government not really being popularly backed, it fell pretty quickly to the Taliban again, and that's why the I believe it's the Islamic Caliphate of Afghanistan still exists in the modern day. But nevertheless, Syria is a little bit different. The Assad regime has been backed and supported by the Russians for an incredibly long time, and it has appeared to really any outside observer that the Syrian government, the Assad government, is only really alive because of Russian intervention and support. The Syrian government was woefully incompetent at the beginning of the civil war. It didn't really appear that they had any major public backing, and it didn't really appear that their government was that effectively put together, or their armed forces for that matter. And so for these reasons, it looks as though the Russians are the only ones that were keeping them alive. And the fact that Aleppo fell, once again, is showing us that the Russians are so tied up in Ukraine that they're no longer around to really keep Assad alive. And considering that Aleppo fell so quickly, it looks like Assad's faith in Syria surviving, or at least his part of Syria surviving, is so low that the fall of Aleppo immediately shook him enough that he has taken himself and his entire family and fled out of the country instantly, not even waiting to see what the remainder of the conflict will look like, or how close rebel forces may make it to Damascus before he was going to flee. And this is giving us a very clear idea that the Syrian government may be on the verge of an absolute collapse at this moment, considering he literally packed up and left before anyone even got close to the capital where he was at the time. So with that in mind, we are starting to also have another question here. Is the Assad regime going to fall? And it seems as though a lot of people are believing that it will fall, especially based off the bombshell news that Assad has already fled to Russia and apparently is going to be staying there well on into the future. And so, Matthew, what are people saying about that, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that the Assad regime is truly done? Do you think chat's cooked, or do you think chat's not cooked and may have a chance?
So it looks like about 79% of the audience said Assad knows his regime will fall, and that's why he suddenly fled from his country of Syria and fled to Moscow, that is, to stay at the very fine Four Seasons Hotel. Some say it's a vacation, and some say it's fleeing. I would personally say it's fleeing, but 9% said we need more intel, and 6% said Assad was planning a visit anyway. And I think the story right now that Assad is trying to sell to the people, and also what Putin is selling to the people, is that Assad was planning to visit for a diplomatic reason anyway. So apparently, according to the Russians, he did not flee. Yeah, this had nothing to do with anything. The fact that Aleppo was taken, Assad figured that now was the best time more than ever to go have a diplomatic conversation with another dictator in Russia. Personally, me, I don't buy that one bit. I think Assad knows that he's in trouble, and the fact that Aleppo fell that fast indicates that the entire country could be delved into chaos very soon once the other rebels detect blood in the water and the sharks start circling. So I think that's why he left. I don't think that the Russian version or the Syrian version of the story is accurate, and considering they lied literally all the time, I would not put any stock in it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I do not believe that the Assad regime is going to be lasting long. The news that he just arrived in Moscow came out today, which is showing us that he definitely fled the country, as you don't leave in the middle of losing a major city for a vacation. You just don't do that kind of stuff. Like, that would be like Zelensky at the beginning of the war in Ukraine going, I want to take the chance to take a vacation to New York City as Kharkiv is being besieged. No one does that if you really think your government or your military has a chance of fighting off the enemy and retaking the city, or even just holding out for the large part. You just don't see that kind of stuff happen. So for that instance alone, I would say that I believe that the Bashar al-Assad regime is truly cooked and may actually be done for at this point. Although they still control a large amount of territory, it appears that Assad's belief in their hold of Syria is so weak that this was able to pretty much throw it entirely off kilter and have them go running for the hills, literally. So moving on from...
And also, Enforcer, another point to make as well that I just saw in the live chat. Since when does Assad, when he needs to go on a diplomatic mission to Russia, why do you need to take your entire family with you to go stay in the Four Seasons? You're not going on a vacation per se. You're going on a diplomatic mission to negotiate something. So why would you need to take your wife, your kids, and your grandkids and things like that along with you if you were there on business? That really doesn't make sense.
I mean, it really does not make any sense at all. I mean, like, look at this. This is very lavish here. You could live in this permanently, even if you had to be exiled, It's pretty nice. Like, I don't think anyone could get against that. Like, this is a pretty nice hotel. And it quite literally is right outside of Red Square. It's right behind Red Square, actually, crazily enough.
That's one of the cheapest Four Seasons I've seen. I guess because it's in Moscow and nobody wants to go there. But $500, that's cheap for Four Seasons. Usually it's like $1,000 a night.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It's not that bad at all. And someone like Assad, who's pretty much robbed their country blind for at least decades at this point, probably could afford to live here forever in exile from Syria if Syria was to collapse. And considering that he is buddies with Putin, it would make a lot of sense. So I would have to say, I think that the Assad regime truly is cooked and done for, because there's really no other way that you could look at this. I mean, there's no other way at all. Like, you don't leave, and I gotta put this out there again, you do not leave your country on a vacation with your whole family in the middle of the second largest city in Syria falling to rebel forces. That's not a time to take a vacation. That's a moment of national emergency, and usually that's when leaders, if they were in another country, would be leaving to return back home to take care of the situation and manage it. So going off of that, we know that he doesn't have any faith that Syria is going to last, and this may truly be the end of Syria, or at least the end of the Assad-aligned regime in the Syrian civil war. And there is a whole bunch of other evidence to lean towards that as well, as we were able to hear that the Russians at least tried to pledge some more support today, as we were able to hear that Syria has received a promise of additional military aid from Russia to bolster its army efforts in preventing rebels from seizing control of the Aleppo province in its entirety in the northwest. Syria does anticipate the arrival of new Russian military equipment at the unpronounceable airbase near Latakia within the next 72 hours. Although at this moment, that appears to be a long-lost hope, as pretty much the entirety of Aleppo, the city, has fallen, and it appears that the entirety of the Aleppo province may fall as well here in the very near future. We've also been able to hear that U.S. airstrikes have been conducted near to the area of Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria, as it appears that U.S. airstrikes are targeting groups that were going to prepare an attack against the Syrian Democratic Forces and also possibly the Syrian Free Army. There is an additional rumor that we've heard as well, that the Syrian Free Army in Tanf is going to be conducting an offensive here in the very near future against the Assad-aligned government inside of Syria. We've also heard that the situation has gotten so severe that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, according to the Islamic State's government, may be sending forces into Syria. Mossad commentary has been very credible so far on their information, so we consider this to be factually correct. At the exact same time, we've also been hearing that that Turkey has now activated their S-400 surface-to-air missile systems and will shoot down Russian aircraft, at least according to what we're hearing at the moment, if they fly over Turkish airspace. This has happened in the past. If people are wondering whether that would really happen or not, this actually did happen back in 2017. Turkey shot down, I believe, 2 or 3 Russian aircraft that ended up violating their airspace during that period of that year. And so this does show that if Turkey believes or sees that Russian aircraft are violating their airspace, they will end up shooting them down in the middle of this conflict. So it appears that the region is largely showing us pretty telltale signs things are going to get heated for a good while. Everyone's really scared the Assad regime may collapse, and they're largely wanting to stop that from happening. Otherwise, Russian control in the Middle East will be completely erased, and there won't even be a regime, whether it is weak or strong, that will exist to support Russian interests in the entirety of the region as a whole. But moving on out of the Middle East and on up into Ukraine, we still have even more information to cover up here, as this conflict has not really been a quiet or slow one today either. We of course had to make sure to cover Aleppo and Syria first, considering that it was one of the probably most bombshell pieces of news that we've had from the Middle East recently. It's actually insane to think that that happened. And let me go pull this up, because I need to give you all an idea of what we're comparing this to. So let's see here. Let me go get this. So, some of y'all may have heard back in the day that I was saying that Aleppo, the Battle of Aleppo, lasted for 8 months to a year. I'm actually wrong. The Battle of Aleppo, the first Battle of Aleppo at least, lasted 4 years, 5 months, and 3 days. To kind of give you all an idea of how tough it was to take the city the first time. So it wasn't exactly a cakewalk, and it wasn't really easy either. You can actually see here the Free Syrian Army control of the city, the Bashar Al-Asad controlled forces in the city, at least one picture of the battlefield during that time. And then you can also see this black mass up here to the north, which was actually ISIS, which of course no longer exists in any actual landmass. But nevertheless, it's a little wild. It's just a little crazy to think that the city fell in 72 hours, and the last time that the battle took place, it took 4.5 years for the Syrian government to take control of the city. So it's kind of showing how badly things are going these days for the Syrian government. But to also give you all a little bit of an idea of the casualties and losses that were sustained in the original battle, overall, amongst all forces, 31,000 soldiers were killed on all sides, and around an additional 21,000 civilians were also killed during the 4.5-year-long battle. This time around, we've actually heard of really no casualties at all, rather than on the Syrian side or the Assad side. And we have also seen that there hasn't really been a lot of fighting at all, showing us that things just aren't really going that well for him. I mean, like, there's really no other way to put it. But I also like, Matthew, how there's a long and extensive list of people that support the Syrians. Let's take a look at them. The Syrian Armed Forces. That one's pretty obvious. Then the Iranian Armed Forces. And then let's see here, what else? Oh, the Russian Armed Forces. Well, that's interesting. And then Iraqi Shia militias. That one's a little interesting one. And then Hezbollah.
Oh, look at that. Hezbollah. They just happen to be involved in a little bit of everything, don't they?
Yeah, they kind of get involved a little bit everywhere and anywhere. I guess, I don't know how people, Matthew, who are like pro-Hezbollah and like anti-Israel, like do the mental gymnastics and hoops, because some of them are pro-Ukraine, which is weird, because it's like, the Russians back up the side that you're supporting in the Middle East. It's like, it makes no sense, because when you see it here, it's pretty clear to see who's the Axis powers and who's the allies, and the Russians are on the Axis side, the Iranians are on the Axis side, and considering that they both fund and support the Syrians, Hezbollah, and Hamas, pretty much all together, it's pretty clear to see they're also on the Axis side as well, and not exactly any kind of freedom fighters or some sort of a deal like that. They are another form of despotic regime that's being controlled by their side. So it's a little interesting to always see people talk about that. But man, look at the units involved that were not the Syrian army. You've got the Al-Tawhid brigade. That's one interesting flag right there, man. That looks like it was made on Microsoft Paint. You also got You also got the Sham Falcons, which is a very interesting name. We also have the Ahrar al-Sham al-Islamiyah, which is a very long name. We also got the Free Idlib Army, which turned into the SSG later on. You also have the Jaish al-Islam, and like I like how all of their logos look like they were truly made on Fiverr. We also have the Fastaqim Union, which apparently was a labor union involved in the conflict. We also got the Levant Front, which has another Microsoft Paint logo. We have the, let's see, what is this group? The Nur al-Din al-Zinki movement, which was another one. And then we had the Army of the Mujahideen, which apparently
it's the Mujahideen.
Dude, they went on tour. They came all the way from Afghanistan for this one. Really impressive. We also have the Syrian Turkmen Brigades. I don't even know what those are. We have the Liya al-Haq Brigades, or forces. We have the Al-Nusra Front, which everyone knows that one. We also have by the way, I forgot to mention to y'all, that is pretty much just ISIS. Like, that's just what they were called in another form. And then, let's see, there is the movement Asala al-Din the Kurd, which is a very interesting sounding movement. And then
just thousands and thousands of factions. But one question, Enforcer, I'm seeing a lot of people in the live chat ask, and honestly, I'm not sure if we would know the answer to this, because obviously our area of expertise is not in Syria. This is something that we're covering today because it's a major event happening, but this is typically not what we cover. But real quick, the question I see a lot of people asking are the forces that are currently invading Aleppo right now, that are from the province of Idlib, are those guys better or worse than the Assad regime? Like, obviously Assad has committed atrocities, he's a dictator, he's bad, but are the people that are invading, are they worse than the current guy sitting there?
That's a good question. It's one that's really tough to answer because they're really about the same. Like, that's kind of the thing about these two factions, is that any other faction would be good. Like, like the Syrian Democratic Forces liberating Aleppo, it would be a pretty big hooray. It'd be like, they're great people. They're American backed. They largely believe in democratic values. They are wanting to try and create some form of a Kurdish state in northern Syria at the end of the conflict, and also help to create a democratic form of government inside of Syria. The Syrian Free Army is also very similar as well, but the SSG is a very questionable one. It kind of is, like, the only way I can say it is they are pretty much equal to the Assad regime, or they may be worse. They are, and let me make sure to find y'all this to at least give y'all an idea of what they are. So let's see here. Let me go and get this. So as y'all can see, they may not be the greatest group, because their flag is the flag of jihad. So, it's a different form of the flag. But this specific kind of inscription that you see on most flags, which is pretty much on any flag of a radical Islamic faction, pretty much tells you that they're not going to be the nicest of people. That's why I said it's a flag of jihad, because having this specific verse on the flag, because that's actually a verse in the Quran, lets you generally know these people are not going to be nice. Al-Qaeda had this on their flag. Another group, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, had this on their flag, so might not be the greatest group of people. They did pretty much come from the ashes of Al-Qaeda as they were going out of style towards the early 2010s, and pretty much have existed in this area to this day. They are anti-Assad, though, I will say that. So at least as far as that, they are all right. But beyond that, they are not that good. They are a unitary, authoritarian, theocratic Islamic state. Generally, anyone who would hear those strings of words put together would think of something like the Islamic Republic of Iran or the Emirate of Afghanistan. Either one of those are pretty questionable and are not exactly great groups. Apparently, we've also been able to hear that they have a, let's see, they actually have an official religion, which is Islam, which lets us know that they aren't really a democratic form of a society that allows for different religions. Not really a thing there. And also, they have been designated a terrorist organization as well. I don't know by who, though. And let me see if I can find them on this list. Wow, there's a lot of them on this list.
Dude, tons of them. Absolutely crazy how many there are.
So
18th Street Gang.
Wait, what?
Is that for real? Well, it says El Salvador.
Oh, look at that.
It's the top one of other organizations. 18th Street Gang.
So let's see. We're looking for the Syrian Salvation Army on this list, because this is the U.S. list here of terrorist organizations. So let me see. Army of Men. Army of the men. So that's interesting. But let's see here. Let's see. I'm trying to see, y'all. Hang on. This is a very long list. Hamas. Down with Hamas. And so let's see here. Let's see here. There's some people on here, man. It's like, are they really on a list? Like, they're on lists of other countries, but it's like, that's a little weird to just see some of them.
I think the truth of this is, like, pretty much the way I see it is the people fighting against Assad, they are fighting to get rid of Assad. And obviously Assad has been there and he's been committing atrocities. Everybody knows how bad he is. But in reality, the groups that are fighting to take control, they're not going to be much better. If anything, they might be marginally better than what Assad currently is. And even the forces that are Turkish-backed and Western-backed to some extent or another, those forces are not really what you'd call saints, or they're not exactly people that are adhering to, I guess, Western values of justice and dignity, but they serve a purpose for uprooting people that we don't like. For example, Assad, who's obviously not pro-Western, he's pro-Russian, and it just serves a purpose. So I don't think there's really any scenario here where it comes out like, let's say we're putting a good guy in charge. I don't think that'll ever happen in Syria, but it's just a matter of, are we getting a worse guy or an equivalent person to how bad Assad was?
Sadly, I cannot find the Syrian Salvation Army when I was looking around on a list. But I did find out that the U.S. Armed Forces are on the list of terrorists in Iran. So that's interesting to note. I was like, that's kind of weird, like the U.S. Armed Forces being a terrorist organization. It's like, that's a really stupid kind of a reach right there. It's like they're our armed forces. That's a little dumb. It's not like they're the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps or anything like that. But anyways, moving on from that though, these are a little bit of a questionable group of people. So whether they're going to be good or not taking Aleppo, that's really up to y'all. And that, like, I would honestly say they're a questionable group enough that it's probably not going to be that great of a thing. Hopefully we can see that everyone takes advantage of the situation that's in the region, such as the SDF and the SDA, well, the SFA, which are actually good factions, and end up starting to advance and take more ground before we see that the Syrian civil war pretty much just replaces Assad with another equally evil group. But moving on from that, and out of the Middle East, it is now time for us to get on up into Ukraine and talk about everything that's been going on up here today. But before we get on into that, I do want to make sure that we address at least a couple of questions, a few questions that have come in today. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night. This one goes to Daniel Anderson, who throws in a very generous $50 donation to the channel and supporting our work. And thank you very much, Daniel, for supporting the work, of course. And we appreciate it very much, helping to keep that coffee brewing. And he said, I don't always get to listen to you guys at 9, but I do always enjoy listening at work the next day, and keep up the amazing work.
And thank you so much for the massive support in helping this channel to keep on running and being here live tonight. It's always nice to know that people make the pilgrimage onto the live streams, and I got to thank you massively for being here with us tonight, because it's another interesting day in the news. We've never covered Syria before on this channel. It's pretty crazy to think that we are now, because we are truly covering world news these days on every single corner. But I still thank you so much for enjoying the stream massively, and hopefully it keeps you company while you're hard at work out there as another hard-working American. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because we're always happy to have folks like you here, and we will make sure, Daniel Anderson, to keep up the amazing work on covering news around the world in support of Western and American interests. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to none other than Andy L, who's a longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, Andy, for throwing in that $20 donation and supporting the channel yet again, and we appreciate it. He said, you guys do a great job, and take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Andy L. And thank you for saying that we do a great job. We try our best to make sure that we have all of the news in the world and get to cover important news topics, and of course all of the ongoing conflicts like Ukraine, which are always important. And I thank you so much for really enjoying the news that we've been covering tonight. From what we've seen, no one's really covering this topic, so it is interesting for us to be able to cover it. And what's crazy is that a lot of people actually are interested in it and want to hear about it. We've had at the peak tonight 10.2 thousand people here. And tonight's kind of an experiment, honestly. Well, really, today's been an experiment, honestly, because we are covering a topic we've never touched on before at all in channel history. We've never touched on the Syrian civil war once. We've covered what's going on in Israel. We've even covered what's going on in Sudan, but we've never covered what's going on in Syria. So it's actually pretty crazy to see that a lot of people wanted to hear the news of what happened in Syria today and get a lot of info on that, because it lets us know that people actually want to hear real news, and we're happy that we're able to provide it and get it out there for all of y'all. Otherwise, no one would really be hearing about this at all, because everyone's hearing about literally anything and everything else except for what's happening in Syria and also really in Ukraine on a day-to-day basis. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Andy L., and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, let's make sure to grab that question from the live chat in honor of Andy L. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the question from the live chat in honor of Andy L. is going to go to Judy from the live chat. He said, do you think the situation in Syria could spread to Iran?
Not really. I don't think it can spread because the Syrian civil war is an active civil war. So the fact that a conflict kicked off here is no shock. It really was just in a very quiet phase for the past 4 years. But something like that kicking off in Iran, I feel like that's still highly unlikely because it seems as though the central government still has an iron fist and a good grip on control, at least at the moment. I believe that might change when Khamenei dies, and we don't know when that would be. But I don't really think that this would ever translate over into the Iranian situation because there's no ongoing conflict or civil war inside of Iran that could be taken advantage of. And so with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, NDL, and sponsoring a live chat so that way we can keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're finally going to be moving on into the Ukraine war news.
All right, and the last super chat of the segment is going to go to Flash1, who's also a longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, Flash, for that $20 support and keeping the channel running. He said, hello to the Enforcer brothers, and I haven't been about to help with the pizza fund for a while, and great to see that the channel is going great, and love your work, and please take a question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Flash1, an old guard and a channel legend. You used to be here a lot back in the day. I remember that, and I thank you so much for being here with us tonight and bringing us on a little trip down memory lane. And I gotta say, thank you so much once again for supporting the Pizza Fund. We absolutely love when people enjoy the channel enough to support it because no one has to, but the people who do help us to be able to do this as our full-time job. And I gotta thank you massively once again for always being one of those channel legends, Flash1, and helping us to be able to have another pizza for another day. Of course, one of our major old guards from Australia who's been around for an incredibly long time and continues to stick with the channel day in and day out. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got for a live chat question for Flash1?
All right, in this last live chat question here before we move into our Ukraine segment, this one is going to go to Michael Thomas, who says, where are the Russian fighter jets flying out of when they fly in support of Assad's forces and striking targets inside of Syria?
Usually they fly out of Syrian air bases, like the air base at Latakia, which I'm going to try and find y'all really quickly. Where the hell is that one? It's somewhere around the city. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. I believe this is the, yeah, here it is, right here. You can actually see an A-50 mainstay down there, which is pretty interesting to note. But this is one of the air bases that the Russian Federation operates out of. You can even see an SU-24 right there on the pad. And largely, when the Russians are conducting any kind of air operations in support of the Assad regime, they're always conducting those out of a Syrian-based airfield in Syria and not an air base elsewhere. That's actually what's really interesting about it, is that the Russian Federation pretty much has a existing expeditionary force that is always in Syria trying to prop up and support the Syrian regime pretty much at any time of the year. And that is really one of the most important air bases that they operate out of, is the Latakia airfield, which is right down here on the coast. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least in the information I know at the moment. And thank you once again, Flash1, for sponsoring that live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is now time for us to finally move on and up into Ukraine and the major airstrikes that have been happening up here today. And that moves us on down into Crimea, where we were able to see that there was a large explosion today inside of the peninsula. from what we've been able to extrapolate, this is somewhere around the Sevastopol area, and that giant white plume of smoke is the surface-to-air missiles catching on fire that were inside of an S-400 launcher. From what we know, the Ukrainians were able to triangulate the location of the SAM system and were able to fire an ATACMS or some other form of a long-range missile at it and end up destroying the radar as well as the TELs that carry the S-400 missiles. Overall, a pretty nice thing to know, and it is great to see that the Ukrainians are still targeting and destroying major SAM sites throughout the area of Crimea. It appears that the Russians, however, have had a little bit of an issue with people leaking out info that may not need to be leaked out, you know, like the locations of their SAM systems and things like that. So it appears that they're trying to find out whose phone that happened on and really nail it down. And when I mean nail it down, quite literally, because they are taking people's phones and just nailing them to the floor now, like just to stop them from posting stuff online.
Look at those phones too. I think I see some iPhones up in that mix right there. That's kind of interesting.
Man, honestly, I see everything, man. Like, I see some Huawei, some iPhones, some Samsung. You know, like, there's a million of them down there, but still.
I see some of those Huawei's in there, too. You mean Huawei?
Huawei?
It's Huawei.
Are you sure?
They're like, cool whip.
1 second. Pronounce. Let me go find that.
Huawei.
Huawei. That's how it's pronounced. It's pronounced.
It's Huawei.
It's Huawei.
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 That's the British way. This is the American way.
Huawei.
So we say Huawei. So there's them damn Huawei
I've heard
phones.
Huawei say it Huawei.
Man, it's Huawei or the highway, damn it, or something like that. But still, nice to see the phones nailed down to the floor because it's showing us the Russians are going into meltdown mode, at least at a minimum. But moving on from that and out of the area of Crimea, it's time for us to move on and up into the area of Salavat. Oh, so many people know Salavat. Salavat's a town of legend these days because it was one of the longest range drone strikes that we've ever seen from Ukraine, where they hit the major oil refinery that makes up about half of the size of the city. The Russians are going into panic mode, at least the air defenses at Salavat, and they ended up shooting at an Antonov 2 today. Once again, let me show you all this so that we all know what we're looking at. This is an Antonov 2. It's a Russian transport aircraft. It's actually a Russian biplane transport aircraft. And if any of y'all know...
Clunker.
Yeah, it's an old clanker, man. But if any of y'all know about the older kind of a biplane that the Ukrainians used to hit the refinery, it looked a lot like an Antonov 2. It may have actually been one. But still, the Russians had been panicking, and so they saw an Antonov 2 flying above Salavat today. It was their own, and they ended up shooting at it enough that this pilot's pants were pierced by bullet fire, and we were also able to see that there were bullet holes all throughout the Antonov 2 as well. So here's the clip. And we see the damage to his pants, and we can see the bullet holes in the Antonov 2.
So wait a minute, his pants got chewed up by the bullets, but he didn't actually get, like, punctured by the bullet?
It was a graze, apparently.
That's a lucky person there.
But man, that thing was getting torn up. When you see it blasted through one of the plexiglass windows. He's like, look, Blad, you can see the camera shaking. He's still shaking from it. He's like, dude, they were shooting at us, man. Like,
they almost messed up their fine curtains over the windows.
Man, the bullets were flying through everywhere, man, like from every angle.
Max said it's like a Swiss cheese airplane. It really is. That thing got Swiss cheesed.
Also, Matty, I was wondering, since we're talking about this right now, how's the lag doing you tonight?
We're still lagging. I wasn't going to say anything about it, but I'm still lagging.
Yeah, because you're really quiet at times, and I'm like, I don't know what's up with that. Like, maybe it's a Discord thing, actually. Who knows?
I think it's an internet thing at this point. I think it's our internet.
This guy is shaking insanely. And they're now getting up into the cockpit. We can see the damage on the outside as well. What do you want? Or whatever the hell they say.
Вот еще выход. Вот еще выход. Но самое веселое вот это.
Oh my god, what hit that? Dude, it's like they fired a flak cannon at the thing. Look at the hole.
It got, man, that thing got messed up. Jeez, man. I don't even know what that could really be. Like, what really could that be?
I have no clue, honestly. Like, I don't even have an idea. It's not a rifle round. Dude, that's 9mm, man. It blew the lung straight out the body. Like, it's like, that was some damaging stuff right there. But moving on out of Salavat and further on towards Ukraine, we were able to see some very interesting stuff going on up in Moscow today, as we were able to hear that Assad arrived there, but we were also able to see some interesting stuff in Dresden, in southern East Germany, as we were able to see more Swedish APCs making their way towards Ukraine. There's a lot of APCs. And there's the end of the train. And that's the end of the clip. But still, a lot of APCs still on their way to Ukraine as Ukraine support continues on well on into the current day. But we were also able to see a lot of air defense activity overnight as well, as Ukrainian pickups and spotlights were out there, of course, trying to shoot down all of the incoming Shahed 136s. And we were able to see that one of those was successful overnight, at least on clip. Oh!
Yes!
Oh, they got it!
Oh, yeah!
Oh, yes! Блин!
Yes! Есть попадание!
Hit them good.
Oh! Look at that. Holy moly! I don't even know what kind of an air defense system that was, but it was successful. Here goes another missile.
Yeah!
And they got it.
You gotta love the hype while they're firing this stuff off. They're just hyped to the max.
And they're hype as hell. Basically. Oh. Oh, we hear it coming in. Oh!
Oh, crap, it hit. Thankfully, it hit nothing important, it looks like.
Well, it hit in the field, I don't think it hit anything important at all. But moving on up into the Kursk area, we were also able to see some Russians getting hit with the drones, Bliet. Very nice. And we're going to be muting the Scooby-Dooby-Doo Yabba-Dabba-Doo music, but we can see here the...
Isn't that parody music they did, what was it? Baraka Flocka Flame or something like that? You remember that video?
I don't. Actually, I don't know.
There was some like parody video they made back in the day of like a rap song or something. That was the same beat in the video.
Really?
Yeah. Like you have to pull it up. I think you'll remember. It's sort of foul, but it was like a parody floating around YouTube like a while back. It was crazy.
You know what? I'll have to try and check on that a little while after the stream. But we can see it hitting a loaf and then a UAZ 469. Oh, dead on the nail. And we see them hitting a Bulhaka as well. And they got it dead on the nail. We now see them slamming into a Kamas, actually. Down with Kamas. And we are now able to see them. Jinx. But we now see them hitting another loaf. And another one. That one's on fire out in the field. We now see them hitting the back of a Buhanka pickup. And now hitting the windshield of a Buhanka. I bid you adieu, Abadoo.
Yes, Abadoo.
Abadabadoo. And they hit in the middle of the field right there. I don't know if they got anyone with that one. But you see them hitting the bank of the truck. They're hitting this guy with a cope cage on his ATV. See how those don't really work on an ATV? They just don't. But moving on from that little clip, simply put, it's now time for us to move on out of the Kursk area and on into our location unknowns, because we were able to see the repair of some armored vehicles. These pictures went hard. Look at that angle grinder. Look at that angle grinder. Look at that headlight. Look at that.
Oh man, he's got the Walt out here. He's got that quality stuff. It looks like an impact wrench of sorts.
Man, high quality, man. It looks like DeWalt. Might even be DeWalt. Impressive stuff. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see a Buk SAM system being destroyed as well by the Ukrainians in an unknown location. But they dropped a bomblet on it, and it went up in a flame. Oh, and it went off-road. And now it's just driving off-road at full speed. The drone's still chasing it around. And they dropped another bomblet on it, which hit the right side. And we now see the system coming to a stop. Oh my god, dude, that guy went flying.
Man, he was crawling like crazy. Like, go back for a second.
Let's see here. And oh my god.
That dude is a straight goblin, like running out of there like that.
Man, he's goblin maxing out here. Man. But that's the end of the clip right there. Really nice to see. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see an air defense MRAP. Kind of a rare use of an MRAP, actually. But they mounted a spotlight and a heavy machine gun to it, and it looks like they're trying to do some air defense work. We also get to see your normal Tacoma out there with a Maxim mounted onto the back. We also get to see a dual-mounted Maxim. And then we finally got to see whatever the hell this was, but we can't really tell what kind of a gun it was because it's just too hard to tell. But nevertheless, moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours, and holy
moly, man, that's the highest losses of troops right there, I believe, 2,030, and it looks like it is confirmed with the keeper of the records, Miss Disa. That is apparently the highest daily loss of the war, exceeding the losses on November the 12th of this year as well, of 1950. So that is wild, the highest one. And also, before anybody asks, that does include the North Koreans in there. So this is a unified losses of 2,000 plus, which is insane to see. Also, 3 Bobcats, by the way. And Enforcer, tell us more.
I mean, how can I say more, Matthew? It's just that juicy. It's insane. Ms. Disa, keeper of the records, told us that 2,030 Russian soldiers being wounded and killed is the highest daily loss of the war, exceeding the 1,950 that were wounded and killed on the 12th of November, not that long ago. The 7-day average has risen to 1,480. So the November troop losses are roughly, take it or leave it, around 45,000. 86 cruise missiles being shot down is the 4th highest daily loss of the war as well, in that category. And the drones and supply truck losses are also remaining high. Overall, we're getting a picture here that things are going pretty good, busting even for the Ukrainians. And the rest of the casualty report just simply puts it out there as it is, with 2,030 Russian soldiers along with North Koreans wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 33 APCs, 86 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 34 artillery pieces, 89 drones, 86 cruise missiles, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, not that bad, and we love to see it. So moving on from the casualty report and on into our frontline news, we were able to see the 3rd Brigade defending themselves against some drones. When you see them here on the training fields getting ready to defend themselves right. When you see
was that a shotgun?
Yes.
Oh crap, that one hit the guy.
Oh, wait a minute, hang on. Oh, it did. Unfortunate.
Man, thankfully it wasn't armed. Oh. Look at that. These guys are getting the up-close experience. If they are screwing up in training, they're getting hit with some type of, like, something hot coming out of the drone, whatever that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that was either. It was like an incendiary or something. But moving on from that and down to Kamyansk, we also get to see the Ukrainians firing on the Russian positions with a BMP. I've never seen training like that, man. I feel like that's like a workplace safety violation or something.
And they're going to put the thermite on them. It's like, you don't mess up in that training, you're going to get burned.
Man, and now we can see the Ukrainians putting the workplace safety to rest as they're firing a BMP into the trees.
Someone said that might be the battery burning. It could be, maybe. They're going to get some hot lithium on them instead.
Man, someone's got to charge the eels. You know what I mean?
Man, the Ukrainians, they're like the Energizer Bunny, so the lithium's probably just feeding them.
Man, there's some Ukrainian out there, man. He's like, listen, man, when the drone batteries are used up, we throw them into the sea. It charges the eels or something like that. It's like, it is, I don't know, man, but I ain't going to question it. Call this BMP the Forester because it's cutting down trees. And that's the end of the clip, but nice to see. Moving on from that and further down the line towards Seversk, we were also able to see a Ukrainian tank in night operations in the region.
Ёбаный урод! Вы на штурме, блядь! Арбиз! Это пиздец, блядь! Что делаем? Отстреливались, наверное, пидорас.
It's just dark in there saying stuff. That's the end of the clip, but I hope that summary was a good one. We're now moving on into the next one, where we also got to see the Russians shooting down their own drone on state TV.
Я вижу тоже, да.
Bled, here it comes,
great.
a Ukrainian drone, they say, as they start laying it to waste. Oh, his gun jammed. Oh, Bled. It's our own drone, Bled. We've shot
Oh, look, they got it. What do you know? Look at that. Oh, God. I think that's, oh, dear.
We will censor this on state television, but we'll leak it out to everyone else in the world to let them know we're a joke, Bled. And now they quietly and awkwardly start walking towards it like, oh, damn, that was ours.
That guy started stepping over the grass like it was like barbed wire or something. He was trying to find any excuse not to go like inch toward the thing. He's like, damn, I don't want to see it. It's ours. Like, you go back and see how high stepping he is over that grass, man. Watch. Look, he's stepping over like barbed wire or something.
Man, he's walking like he's wading through the swamp to go shoot at ducks or something. It's like, bro, you're not at the old duck hunting grounds, dude. This is the war. This is a battlefield, man. But moving on from that now to Seversk area and further on down and towards Karlivka, we did get to see some rare uses of switchblades. Many people who are in the Chicago area may have seen switchblades very recently. However, this is a different kind of switchblade, a long-lasting switchblade that actually can take out a tank. Oh, and what's this? Why, this Russian commander. I think, oh my god.
Hey, man, the Switchblade 600, that thing does some damage. I'm sure there's some munitions on board, but that was crazy.
Krasse. And now they're taking out, oh my goodness.
Damn.
Switchblades are putting in the work. And now they're going down the trench line here. Oh! Oh!
Nothing like getting cooked on the Siegfried line.
Man, nothing like it.
Just chaos. Russians running everywhere, supply trucks getting hammered and pounded on their tiny posts. Man, it's just chaos.
Ivan and his men were driving their tiny Kamaz, and it was getting pounded. Like, Man, I hate to know that the Discord call lag is still persistent even now. It's like, we've got 2 PCs now. It's like, this is crazy.
I think I know what the problem may be. I think I'm starting to get a sense of what it might be.
And what is it?
I think it is on your end.
How can it be on my end, though?
We'll have to discuss it afterward because that'd be a hell of a conversation right in the middle of the news.
Ah, that's true, that's true. But we also get to see a zoo park getting destroyed.
Ah, yes, the Russian zoo park. A wonderful creature. And this is the best impression of David Attenborough that I can do. So, Enforcer, bring out the Attenborough.
The Ukrainian drones strike at the Russians. As I try and figure out what the hell I'm even supposed to be saying, this was thrown on me at the last moment's notice. We can now see them striking the Russians a second time and a third time. The Ukrainians prefer to strike the Russians in groups, ensuring that the Russians are taken out quite consistently. This is called a wolf pack sort of an attack, making sure to target the weakest and illest of the Russians with the sickest and illest of attacks. We can see the Russians showering quite nicely in the fields, preparing a nice toasty meal for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians will not go hungry. But moving on from that and out of this clip and on out of this area in the southern front, we are now moving on down to Novoprokopivka, where we got to see an FPV strike on a cat.
Подвозу. С полчка за 300 только подъехали. Разъебало. Вот наша вся провизия, наши БК и все остальное. Сука! Сука! Пиздец.
He says to show his face real quick to make sure everybody knows who he is.
Man, it's sad. It's really sad. He had to get that reaction clip, man. He's like anyone on YouTube, man. He's got to get that reaction thumbnail where he's just like pogging or whatever, you know, or his mouth is just wide up. He's going, oh, you know, like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You got to do it, man. It's just like a union requirement on YouTube or something. But anyways, moving on from that and down into Odessa, we got to see a Gyrza M-class patrol boat. This thing looks
Oh, wow.
sick.
I like that one, man. That camo is pretty sleek on that. That's a sleek looking boat all the way around. Like that's I like that one.
Man, it's just simply sick. It's unequivocally sick. It's very sick, long-lasting sick. We love to see it. And it's good to see it out there in the seas right outside of Odessa. But with that, it is now time for us to actually move on up into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1010 of the war. And so, without further ado, let me see if there's something from today. Because he put out something for Thanksgiving, but nothing for today.
Well, somehow we got through the news faster than usual. We had more news to cover tonight. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Crazy as a matter of fact, Blade. Let's see here. Do we have something? Yes, we do. Yes, we do, Blade. Here we go. Here we go. 1 second, folks. Let me get this set up properly. Huh?
He said, "Bah."
Oh, I thought you were making noise. I was like, are you okay? I was like, I don't know. But here we go. Here is speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 1010 of the war.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Сьогодні є кілька важливих рішень. Разом з головкомом Олександром Сирським сьогодні визначили, що варто провести заміну командувача сухопутних військ Збройних сил України. Новим командувачем призначений генерал-майор Михайло Драпат. Також новим заступником головкома призначений полковник Олег Апостол. До цього він командував 95-ю бригадою ДШВ. Обидва дуже досвідчені воїни. Михайло Драпатий в цьому році організував оборону на Харківському напрямку та фактично зірвав російську наступальну операцію. Загалом він з 2014 року на війні на найбільш гарячих та відповідальних напрямках. Олег Апостол – Герой України. Пройшов всі командні посади в підрозділах ДШВ. Також захищає нашу державу з 2014 року. Чітко знає, що необхідно для зміцнення боєздатності нашої армії. Зараз саме Олег Апостол відповідатиме за нову якість підготовки наших воїнів. У нього є повна підтримка на всіх рівнях, щоб забезпечити саме це. Сухопутні війська Збройних сил України – це основа армії. Багато залежить для України від того, наскільки ефективно працюватиме структура сухопутних військ та усіх сил оборони та безпеки України. Потрібні зміни в управлінні людьми, які забезпечать більше результатів на полі бою. Призначив також полковника Павла Палісу заступником керівника Офісу, бойовий командир 93-ї бригади «Холодний Яр». Він добре розуміє, що в бригадах, на фронті, і мені потрібна саме така людина, щоб точно знав в щоденному режимі інформацію безпосередньо з фронту. І ще одне. Міністерство оборони України продовжує розвивати наш застосунок «Армія Плюс», і вже в грудні до всіх сервісів «Армії Плюс» має приєднатись Національна гвардія України. Зокрема, це стосується переведень. Провів сьогодні засідання Ставки. Найбільше уваги енергетиці, захисту об'єктів, роботі з відновлення. Були відповідні доповіді. Є завдання і щодо прикриття об'єктів, і щодо комунікації з партнерами заради постачання систем ППО. Говорив сьогодні з канцлером Німеччини Шольцем. Я подякував Олафу за лідерство Німеччини в постачанні ППО, і це Петріоти та системи Айріс-Т. Ми обговорили наші наступні кроки в оборонній співпраці. Сьогодні ж говорив з президентом Франції Еммануелем Макроном. Я вдячний Еммануелю за те, що сприйняв наш запит щодо додаткового постачання. І Франція, і Німеччина можуть ще більш суттєво допомогти нам зараз у захисті проти російських терористичних ударів. Звичайно, координуємо наші контакти і з іншими партнерами. Говорив із прем'єр-міністром Норвегії Стере. Подякував прем'єру особисто, його урядовій команді Норвегії за збільшення підтримки України на наступний рік. Ми це дуже цінуємо. Вдячний парламенту Норвегії за консолідовану підтримку України. Обговорили спільні дії на найближчий час. Ми будемо збільшувати спільну роботу і для виробництва зброї в Україні, і для захисту енергетики. Окремо обговорили співпрацю з Норвегією в сфері ППО. Я дякую за готовність нам допомагати. Сьогодні ж зустрівся з дуже представницькою делегацією з Латинської Америки. Депутати парламентів, сенатори. Майже увесь регіон був представлений. Детально обговорили ситуацію та перспективи і тут, в нашому захисті, і у відносинах з Латинською Америкою, з іншими партнерами. Окреслив, що саме можемо зробити, як саме можемо поглибити співпрацю з Латинською Америкою. І я вдячний за всі слова підтримки, за всі емоції і за те, що Україну чують. Разом маємо наближати справедливий мир і тиснути на Росію. Все для цього робимо. Дякую всім, хто допомагає. Слава Україні!
And Haram Slava.
And Haram Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1010 of the war. And that actually, crazily enough, is the first time ever in maybe months that we've actually ended the news segment right on time at 10:40 local time, which means that the news segment lasted for an hour and 40 minutes, which is pretty crazy because that means that we have loads and loads of time to be able to cover every single question that came in, every single super chat, and every single live chat question, hopefully. And so with that, I hope that of course, moves us on into this next segment incredibly well. But I also have to give a massive shout out to the 10.2 thousand people who were here tonight at the peak. It's crazy to know that so many people have been enjoying this channel and even enjoying it when it's covering news topics we've never covered before. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And Matthew, take it away.
All right, so it's now time for the final question segment of the night, and we have one more poll to get to, and the poll says, Zelensky says he'll consider freezing the war with Russia if NATO membership is granted to Ukraine, that is, and what are your thoughts? So 43% of the audience said that's a good idea and a possibility, while 33% said that is not a real possibility at all, and 15% said that's a bad idea, but it's still possible. And I would say this, I am solidly with the 33%. I don't think that's a real possibility. Once again, Russia is entirely opposed to Ukraine being in NATO whatsoever, and they are not going to agree to any negotiation or stipulation to let Ukraine be in NATO at all. It doesn't matter if it's just part of the territory of Ukraine or whatever it is, NATO can't be in the picture or Russia is not going to agree to end the war or even freeze the conflict. So I don't think that's a real possibility. That was a very, very big give for Zelensky to offer that, but I don't think that's possible because Putin is not going to be realistic and he's not going to agree to it. So I'm with the 33%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's probably not a real possibility, at least at the moment as well. I would have to agree with the 33% because Putin has made it very clear that he does not want Ukraine in NATO under any circumstances. Honestly, at this point, we understand that Putin still wants to achieve total victory. So while that's fairly reasonable of Zelensky, I still think that that probably will not make it anywhere at all, at least in my opinion, with what the Russians are claiming right now. So the war will probably have to go on even farther for the Russian aims of total victory to be humbled down into accepting some sort of a compromise. And so with that, I hope that does...
Also, by the way, Enforcer, W13RD guy said in the chat that NATO probably won't let Ukraine in anyway. And that's also another point which I didn't even bring up because I pretty much stopped at the fact that Putin wouldn't agree to it. But also, NATO is not going to let Ukraine into the alliance with an active conflict going on. It doesn't matter if they've frozen the war or whatever the case is, NATO will not let them in, and they've already said that. So, you know, Zelensky's trying to find ways to basically say that he's willing to talk and negotiate, but in reality, these are just not real possibilities. So we're down to basically this. Russia wants to take a ton of land and give Ukraine no security guarantees whatsoever so they can reinvade the country in just a couple of years. And that's why they're so opposed to NATO taking Ukraine into the alliance, is because they're worried about, once again, that they need to be able to invade in a couple of years. And if they're in NATO, that's going to make that impossible. So I don't think we're really going to make any progress here in negotiations. I think it's pretty much a dead end. But at least Zelensky is trying to negotiate some, even before they even begin. But I just don't think it's going to get anywhere, in my personal opinion.
I would say for now, I don't think it will, but in the future, the Russians will have to give. Otherwise, the economic issues are going to eat them alive in the background, most likely. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best we can in our opinions. And with that, it's time to move on into the questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first super chat segment of the night, our first question here, while I absolutely stutter my way through it, this one goes to Andy L, once again, who throws in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you, Andy, once again for the second support of the night, and we appreciate that very much. He said, good night to the LSA, and I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and long live the LSA.
And thank you so much for the massive support, Andy L, and a good night to you. And we actually did have a pretty good Thanksgiving. It kind of was a shorter-lived thing. We just kind of ate, hung out for a couple of hours, and then got back over here and got back to work dealing with some stuff in the background. But it was still a fun Thanksgiving. I'll say that. For some reason, though, I'm not going to lie. Hopefully, no one can really tell this and how I'm talking tonight. But tonight, for some reason, I just feel detached. I don't know. I feel like maybe another day off would have been nice for some reason. Although, honestly, it's weird when we have nights off because we really don't know what to do. But I don't know, Maddie. How do you feel tonight?
I personally feel fine. I just feel like not really detached per se, but every time we get back to streaming from taking a night off, it always takes me like a solid night to get back like in the groove of it. But once we get kicked off again, like for the first of the week, or like for this example on Friday, which is a weird time to start again, then we're all good to go. But it's like a warm-up thing for me. You got to get warmed up into it, and then you get right back into the groove.
Yeah, it's like, it's a weird thing with that, especially when it's just knocks you off schedule. You kind of got to get acclimated to doing it again. So I guess maybe that's what I'm feeling tonight. I'm not really sure. But still, I thank you so much for the support, Andy, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And of course, thank you so much for long living the LSA. This is incredible to know that a lot of people do love the LSA and love to see it keep on rolling. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, I saw someone say this in the chat. And I guess we'll just get a live chat question for free really quickly. Someone said, Ukraine needs to reclaim its nuclear weapons. The Russian invasion would not occur in that case. Hell no. I'm sorry. I'm just not one of those people. Like, I never agree with nuclear proliferation of any kind. I'm never a fan of countries having nuclear weapons. Can't really control that, though. But I'm certainly against other countries getting nuclear weapons that don't have them right now. That's 100% something I'm against. And I do not like the idea of giving Ukraine nuclear weaponry. I don't really like the idea of giving anyone nuclear weaponry at all. Like, if someone said, let's give Poland nuclear weapons, I'd be like, hell no, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. Because it's nuclear proliferation. And that's like playing with fire. And a lot of people don't get it, but nuclear weapons are extremely dangerous. And I guess a lot of people don't get that anymore because it's not really like harped on every day by the government. But nuclear weapons are extremely dangerous weapons. They're the most deadly thing that we've been able to create. And letting countries just randomly get nuclear weapons whenever you want them to is going to start nuclear proliferation out of the ass. Like, it's going to be endless at that point, and pretty much everyone in the world that can afford to make one will make one at that point. And that would be a absolutely horrendous scenario, because nothing can happen diplomatically because everyone has a nuclear weapon, and so you can't really leverage anyone or anything to make something happen. And then on top of that, some unstable governments might start throwing nukes as a last resort, because there's so many people at that point that have the ability and the authorization to fire a nuke. The chances of a nuke being fired are far more likely on a day-to-day basis than it was in the past. So giving Ukraine nuclear weapons, I'm not a fan of at all. At least,
and also, not to mention, if there's anything out there that might cause Russia to go off the cliff and actually fire a tactical nuke, it honestly would be that. And I know some people are going to say, well, no, you're falling for Putin's propaganda. No, I'm not. That would be a scenario where Putin would have the justification, at least in his mind, to maybe take extreme actions against Ukraine. Because once again, that's been the whole thing that he's been saying the whole time. We have NATO right on our borders, and they are potentially going to nuclear arm Ukraine once again, and that's a existential threat for Russia. So if Ukraine were to get nukes, that would give Putin the way out, basically, to go do something heinous to Ukraine. I don't think that's a bluff on that one. I think that would be an actuality. That would be one of those red lines that are actually real, that we probably should not cross.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. I don't know why people keep pushing for that, because it's the goofiest thing I've heard in a while. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I like to feel like things usually have merit and explain them like they make sense. But saying that we should just give Ukraine nuclear weapons is absolutely insane. Like, that, I feel like that's about as insane as saying we ought to give Ukraine a nuclear submarine or an aircraft carrier or an F-35 or a THAAD. Like, all those kinds of things fall under the same category to me of being foolhardy and crazy. That just does not make any sense for multiple reasons. On each topic, you could come up with a million reasons why that would not be a good idea. And so I'm just not really a fan of that. But I saw someone bring that up, so I was like, I gotta address that, because here's how I'm going to explain this point. At the beginning of the war, people were reasonable and rational about what we were giving Ukraine. And people would be like, let's give them this, but let's make sure to weigh in our national security assurances and purposes. Also, don't ban that one, Matthew, because I'm about to address that one. And people were reasonable about what we were giving Ukraine. And then I don't know what it is, I guess radicalism or something took over some people, so then they just throw everything out the window and just act stupid. And then they're like, we have to give Ukraine a nuclear aircraft carrier and a nuclear submarine, and we have to give them nuclear weapons. We're going to literally give them everything. Like, even if it's brand new and it's proprietary technology that the United States owns, we're going to give it to Ukraine. Damn the consequences. And it's an absolutely crazy thing to me, because, like, for example, here's someone right here, R.D. Marrero, who says, here come again the enforcers falling for Putin propaganda. What involved in Putin propaganda, it makes America look out for its own security interests? Like, I don't know if you understand this. I guess you don't. But America puts hundreds of billions of dollars into research and development programs to create a new and competent weapon system decades ahead of everyone else. You give one of those to Ukraine, and somehow one of them gets destroyed, or the Russians get their hands on it somehow, or some Ukrainian just starts leaking the manuals because he wants $10,000, which can happen. And then the Russians know every single thing about that proprietary weapon system that they were not supposed to know, and we just lost our decades leading edge that we had with that weapon system. There is nothing about that at all that speaks reasonableness or sense. That is raw stupidity fueled by fanaticism, which is something that I'm not at all a fan of, because while I am pro-Ukrainian, I am more so pro-Western and pro-American. And if anything starts to happen to where it puts America's interest at stake to benefit Ukraine, that is a hell no in my book every single time. I'm never going to say I'm going to disadvantage the American citizenry of this republic for the benefit of people overseas that at the end of the day are not Americans or not Europeans. That's nothing that I will ever agree with, because that doesn't make any sense. If we're screwing ourselves over long term to maybe give Ukraine a short-term advantage for some reason, that makes no sense. That's a lose-lose, because they probably will end up having something happen with the system where it falls into the Russians' hands, because every single, like, just to put this out there, every single frontline weapon system we have given the Ukrainians has fallen into the Russians' hands in one way or another. The M1A1, the Bradley, the Max Pros, any form of the MRAP, any kind of system like the Javelin, all of that has eventually been captured by the Russians. The reason why we sent that stuff in the first place was because all of the systems we're sending are 40 plus years old, and there's nothing proprietary or secret about them anymore that would risk national security if they were to be caught. So that's why we sent them, because we knew there would be no loss. There's only a net negative. We support Ukraine, we get rid of our old weapon systems. But then when you start saying, let's give them everything brand new and modern, now you're screwing us over, because you're giving them a maybe better fighting edge, but you're completely screwing over national security interests in the meantime. And that's where it starts moving from being pro-Ukrainian to anti-Western and anti-American, because you're jeopardizing our own security at the sake of Ukraine's. And that's just dumb. Like, I don't even think I need to explain that, because I'm not, like, here's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to jeopardize y'all's security for Ukraine's. Like, I will help out. I'm all for helping Ukraine out and supporting them. But once we start crossing the line where I have to start hurting y'all to benefit them, that's a no deal every single time. But with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. At least I can with that, because a lot of people don't get the nuance with that. Some people, for some reason, act like when you're pro-Ukrainian, you've got to be pro-everything, like just give them everything. But there has to be some reasonable limits, and those are the reasonable limits I always say on this channel, and that applies to everyone. Like it applies to Taiwan, it applies to South Korea, it applies to Israel. And so with that, I hope that does kind of give a good lay of the land right there. But with that, we are on to another question that's been asked. And it seems as though it's one that I was just talking about right there. So Matthew, take it away.
All right, so we did ask y'all in the audience, what do you think about this topic? Because obviously, you can say in the live chat what you think, but let's see what the entire audience thinks. So, are you in favor of rearming Ukraine with nuclear weapons? That's the question on the poll, and it looks like 65% of the people said no, that would be too extreme to give nukes back to Ukraine, while 34% said yes, rearm Ukraine with nukes. And me personally, like I said, I'm with the enforcer. I don't think that rearming Ukraine with nuclear weapons would be a very wise idea whatsoever. Number one, we should probably get rid of nuclear weapons, not give them more to more countries. That is not a smart idea. Nuclear weapons are very dangerous, and once again, like the enforcer said, someone that gets rogue could decide to launch one at somebody, and that would cause a very bad chain of events. So that would be very, very extreme. And also, it is possible that the Ukrainians could sell the technology if there was a corrupt official within the government, which we know there are some corrupt ones left, and that is still a possibility. So I'm definitely with the 66%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 66% as well for all the reasons I just mentioned a second ago. That would just be a bad idea all around to proliferate nuclear weapons for a short-term gain. Also, I saw someone say, here we go. Someone said, how can anyone not trust Zelensky? He stayed put when Russia came storming in when he had offered to ride out of town. Come on. It's not about trusting Zelensky. Like, that's the problem with the logic. Zelensky isn't running an aircraft carrier, and he's not running the silo with a nuclear weapon in it. And he's not the one who's captaining a nuclear submarine. He's the president of Ukraine. He's not an omnipotent being that's just the only thing in Ukraine running everything. And that's the issue there. Zelensky has to disseminate things down to people who are lower in the ranks. So there's going to be a battery commander for those nuclear weapons. There's going to be a captain and thousands of sailors on board an aircraft carrier if we gave Ukraine one. There would be hundreds of sailors on board a submarine. And God knows how many people would be involved on the logistical side of things, supplying and maintaining those systems and also repairing them. There are thousands of hands, tens of thousands of hands that would touch these weapon systems that are not Zelensky's. And that is where the security threat comes in, because we don't know those people. We know Zelensky. Yeah, he's a pretty trustworthy guy, but we don't know the tens of thousands of people that are going to be touching that weapon system on the daily basis. And with that in mind, one of those people may not be the most loyal kind of a person. And one of those people may be looking for money, because that happens in the U.S. military. Some of y'all may have heard about it a while ago. It was about a year ago when 2 U.S. sailors on board an aircraft carrier were arrested on charges of treason because they sold state secrets of the U.S. Navy, the Department of Defense for the large part, for $10,000 a pop to the People's Republic of China. And that is treason. And if that can happen in the U.S. military, it will happen in Ukraine's. And to be entirely honest, it will happen a lot more in Ukraine's military than it would happen in ours. Like, just being entirely honest, operational security isn't exactly a strong suit of Ukraine's. That's kind of how we make the news possible every night. And things would leak out one way or another. And that's why it's a massive security risk. And also it's a massive security risk because they're in an active war. And it's generally understood that once we get into a war, there will be proprietary technology information that will end up getting out, because our finest tanks will be destroyed on the battlefield, and the Russians or the Chinese would retrieve them, and they would be able to comb through them with a fine toothpick. There's a whole bunch of technological systems that would be combed apart once a war began. But we're trying to keep that technological advantage until the war begins. And if we give our top stuff to Ukraine, and it ended up going down the way I'm saying that every other weapon system we've given has gone, which it will, because there's nothing wrong with it, that's just how war is, we lose the proprietary edge instantly before we even get into an actual conflict. So I hope that covers that base fairly well. I hope we beat that down as best we can. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so with that, we are now moving on from our polls and into our Super Chat segment once again. And starting off with our first one here, this one is going to go to none other than John Garner, a channel legend who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to you, John, once again, for throwing in that support and helping to keep the channel running. And he says, one for the pizza fund, and I'm eating smoked turkey, and I thank Mama for teaching me how to cook.
Hey, and I gotta thank you so much for the support, John Garner, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope you're enjoying that smoked turkey, because that's gotta be some absolutely good deliciousness. We had turkey yesterday. We also had pork, too. We had pork and turkey, because the turkey was kind of small. But the pork and turkey were absolutely delicious. And I gotta thank you so much for the support. And I also gotta say, it is good to know that your mother taught you well on how to cook. Cooking's important. Like, I don't really cook well or a lot, but when I do, it was all right. And so I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next Super Chat here, this one goes to Leora Abigail, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Leora, as well for that support. And she said, Enforcers, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, long-lasting turkey leftovers, and it sounds like part of the Arab world is on the way to a period of chaos once again, and it worries me a bit because of the terrorists reorganizing to take control.
And I thank you so much for the support, Leora. And we did have a great Thanksgiving. It was a pretty good one. It wasn't long, like it wasn't incredibly long. It wasn't like we were enjoying Thanksgiving all day. It was really just for a couple of hours. And then we got right back to being in Enforcer Studio 2.0 and working hard on crunching the numbers and getting everything done over here. But beyond that, I do have to say that it was fine beyond that. It was pretty fun. And let's see here. And we actually didn't have a lot of long-lasting turkey leftovers, just to answer that really quickly, because the turkey was so small, we only got like a couple of slices of it each, and then the turkey was gone. We had literally eaten all of it, so it was kind of sad, because I love turkey, like real turkey, long-lasting turkey.
Real turkey. If you give me the chance, I'll saute the turkey and serve the turkey, and taste the turkey.
If you allow me to cook the turkey, I will make sure that it has a whole, rich flavor, a long-lasting, savory flavor.
No, we're not talking about the turkey like the Erdogan. We're not the fence rider. Honestly, when we were saying that, I was thinking it kind of sounded like we're talking about Turkey, like the country here for a minute, like Erdogan when we were saying that. Sounded kind of odd.
I would have to say that our turkey is not a sniveling, two-faced piece of shit like Erdogan turkey. It's not like that at all. Mine is delicious, absolutely well-cooked, real.
We want whole turkey, whole turkey.
We want good temperature, long-lasting temperature. We want real flavor, long-lasting flavor. And I would like to thank the United States and the President for allowing us to have this delicious turkey.
You have to baste the turkey. You have to baste.
And I would like to also say one more thing. I've removed another minister or something like that. It's like,
no.
But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least that part. But as far as Syria is going, it is a mixed bag, because the SSG isn't exactly a good group. We've already covered that earlier tonight. And so it's a little bit questionable to see that they took Aleppo. But as long as the SDF can take advantage of, the SDF and the SFA can take advantage of the Assad's government's weakness, which is clearly showing at this point, I think we should be fine. And we should see that the SSG remains a small group in northern Syria.
At least for now. I would hope so. Or maybe we can even see that the SSG would be crushed. I have a feeling that the Turks would probably want to crush them at this point as well. Even though it's not a Western thing, they probably don't want a radical Islamic group on their border, I would suppose. So they would probably help out in crushing them as well, maybe. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And thank you once again for support, Leor Avgile, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to JP on the road, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, JP, for that support. And of course, he's a longtime channel viewer as well, and it's good to see you once again to JP. He said, seriously, when searching in a wiki or any files, hold Control F to open a search. You could have found what you're looking for in that wiki in just seconds. Try it. You'll thank me later. And long live the LSA.
And I thank you greatly for your input on how to run the stream, but let me explain to you what I found out. The Control F function does work a great deal, but the problem is that it does not allow us to have comedic relief, because we get through stuff so quickly, really quickly, that we cannot laugh at certain things. Like, for example, if I was to go and pull up the list of, let's see, let me go here, one second, the Syrian, this is Salvation Government, there we go. I'm gonna have to stop that voice really quickly, but if I go here, and I find that little, here we go. When we go to this list, if I click Control F, which I will, we pop that up, and then we put in Syrian, let's see here. There we go. And so there's one of them. Then we move up to the next one and the next one. But still, the problem
I think
is,
that's a very powerful tool right there, JP. That's actually a very good tip in my opinion.
I've actually looked at this. Like, I told folks I was going to do that off stream one day, and I did, and I found out that it does work. But the problem with that is that if I do that, we kind of lose a little bit of our comedic ability by doing that, because when we look through the list, this list at least, I can show you all things that would be hilarious to make a funny thing off of, like the U.S. Armed Forces being on a terrorist list in Iran, which we wouldn't be able to find if I just did the Control F thing. So that's kind of why I don't do it on air. It's actually a bit of a deliberate choice, because I saw it and I was like, okay, this actually would be easy to find things quickly, but sometimes it's better if we kind of just, I guess you kind of meander around on air, because it allows us to be able to find funny things to laugh at that we wouldn't find if we were too direct and too quick with finding the exact information. So that's kind of why we don't do it, but I do thank you so much for bringing it up. Again, that's not the first time we've heard that, and I got to thank you for the recommendation, because we do know how to use it. It's just that it takes away from the comedic ability that we have, which is kind of something that is a little important on the channel, because while we are all about information and analysis, there is also a part that we try and lean into where we try and joke around and make funny jokes. Whether they're funny or not, that's kind of up to y'all. Some people find them really funny. Other people don't really find them funny at all and think they suck, and that's kind of like a subjective thing. I would assume really anyone with a comedic bone would probably assume that they suck, because we're not like comedians. We're not natural born comedians. But beyond that, however, we still have to try and make sure to have some comedic relief. So that's why I spend all that time wandering around, so that way I can find stuff like Red Hand Commando and make fun of that, because it's such a goofy name. Or the Promised Day Brigade. I don't even know what the hell that is. You can go through the lists and stuff and find the funny things. But I do thank you so much for the support. Wait a minute. Nexta is on a terrorist list in Belarus? What?
What the hell? Wait a minute. Show that again. Yeah, that's actually the Nexta. Why the hell is that? Who designated that as a terror group?
Belarus.
Okay, that explains it then, because why would Wikipedia even list them as a terrorist group? They're not. They're a news organization.
That's crazy to me, man. That's news to me. Why are they? I don't even know why they're on the list. I don't even think we'll get an explanation for that. Well, you know what? Let's go see.
Oh my god.
Let's see. Since October of 2020, Nexta and its logo are considered extremist content in Belarus. Wait a minute. Roman Protasevich, which is one of the editors-in-chief, was placed by the Belarusian authorities on a list of individuals involved in terrorist activity.
Let's see. It says Amnesty International, for whatever that's worth. They stated that the classification of the bloggers as terrorists was arbitrary, and that the Belarusian decision was based solely on some journalism here. So that sounds about right. That's why I figured when I saw that they probably just like figured, oh, this guy's putting out journalistic stories we don't like, so let's just go ahead and put him on the terror list, and that'll fix him up. But that didn't stop them. They're still posting every day.
Yeah, that's crazy. Also, the YouTube channel that Nexta runs was founded by the then 17-year-old student. So they were starting off young, like younger than we did, because I started this at 20. They started it when they were 3 years younger than me, which is actually really commendable. Like, good shout out to them. That's pretty impressive. And they made a pretty big news platform for themselves as well. But beyond that, though, moving on. Well, wait a minute, hang on. Dang it, man! I wasn't supposed to get off that. Hold up. Oh man, I got to go back and find it, because this is the exact thing I'm talking about. Like, when you go through the list, there's like crazy things that pop up. Like when we actually like meander around that we can talk about on a moment's notice. And while it seems like we generally have like a really good formula and everything on air, and and all that, we really don't. And I have to kind of wander around sometimes and kind of come up with stuff on the spot like that. Like, who would have known that Nexta is on any kind of a list like that? I wouldn't. But let me go back down here to Nexta. There we go. And, and then you can go through and find a whole bunch of other interesting ones. Hold up. Wait a minute, dude, this is on a lot of lists. I did not know that.
That's crazy. Also, they have a book as their logo with two swords next to it. So they're a little confused here. They don't know if the pen's mightier than the sword or the sword's mightier than the pen.
Man, the pen sword is mightier than the sword pen. Like, it's something like that.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Maoist Communist Party. Huh. That's one hell of a party, dude. Maoism came to Turkey. Like, I didn't even know. Let's see here. Dude, there's a lot of Maoist groups. Let's see here. Hang on. Trying to see if there's any other interesting ones. Huh.
Iran International is on the terrorist list as well. It's listed by Iran as a terrorist group. That's another journalistic organization there. I'm not really sure, how they really lean. Obviously, I think they lean a little bit toward the Iranians, but considering they put them on a terrorist watch list, I don't know.
Man, they just did that probably because they don't have control of them. It's like, man, screw them or something like that. It's like, but let's see here. Interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, wow. That's on the list in Russia. That makes sense. But let's see here. The Indian Mujahideen. They have a Mujahideen in India. I didn't even know. Like, once you go through this list, you find out so many things. Oh, look, the Houthis. They're on the list as well with their shitty looking like Pizza Hut logo. I don't even know what that's supposed to be, but it looks like a advertisement for a pizza shop or a kebab shop, one or the other. It looks terrible.
Let's see. The top one you can get Supreme. The second one you get
Wait a minute, no. Wait a minute, dude. They actually have the inscription down here. This is what it says, bar for bar. Like, literally. God is the greatest. Death to America. Death to Israel. Curse be upon
Whoa.
And then victory to Islam. It's like, that's what this is. I didn't even know what it was the entire time. But that's what this thing says. It's literally just it's like a slogan. Like, they didn't even have a flag. They just have a slogan. That's stupid, honestly.
Yeah, it's a terrible slogan too. Very anti-Semitic.
Yeah, well, that's usually what you find in the the Iranian supported groups, is that kind of stuff. Like,
I know. I'm just making that clear, so in case YouTube listens to this or something like that, they understand that we're not saying that because we support that. We are against it completely.
But okay, Hezbollah's on the list by like everybody. Like that's like obvious. This one is as well. The Georgian National Legion is considered by the Russians to be a questionable group. This is the thing, is like, all these groups on the list is like, they're not, like some of them are not. Because, like, for example, the Georgian National Legion isn't, it's like they haven't even been documented to conduct a war crime. Like, we haven't seen it ever. We've never heard of it. So it's like, that's just ridiculous that they would be on a list. Some of these, though, are legit. Like, like some others that we've looked at just a second ago. But still, with that, though, we are going to be moving off of this list because it is time for us to move on to the next question. But I hope that does address that well, with the whole Control F thing and kind of like the comedic relief side of things that we can do, because you find a whole bunch of interesting stuff that you wouldn't find otherwise that we can kid about. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a super chat from Plazoth, who puts in an $11 donation, and thank you very much, Plazoth, for that support as always. I don't see any comments attached to it, sadly, but thank you very much for supporting the channel once again and helping us to keep on running. And we also have an $8 support from Live Laugh, Toasted Bath, and thank you once again for that 8. And they said, Happy Thanksgiving to the LSA family, and please take one from the chat and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question here goes to Cliff West, who said, my question is, what about the Russian Navy and air bases in Syria? What's the current status of those, considering the ongoing rebel fight?
They're currently active and fully operational because they're far enough away from the active areas of battle that they're not really being directly affected by it, to be entirely honest. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And Matthew, I believe we had a pretty big one come in that you may or may not have seen.
Yeah, no, I saw it. And our next one here is going to be that one. It's from Rita Fuchs, who puts in a $100 donation, the largest chat of the night. And thank you very much, Rita, for that support. And I do not see a comment attached to it. It was just a big red super chat, and it had a number 3 on it for the 3rd ever super chat on a live stream. So thank you very much once again, Rita, for that massive support. And once again, it is the viewer support, like we always say, that keeps the channel running. So we do very much appreciate it, and it is very much appreciated, like I said. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Rita Fuchs, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And I gotta thank you for the massive support in helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you once again. And thank you for being a channel legend as well and being here pretty much every single night. And so with that, a massive thanks once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from GunFox61, also known as the Medic Fox, and he put in that 5. And thank you very much, GunFox, for that support once again. He said, in history, 11/28/1983, the STS-9 first Space Lab mission, first European Space Agency astronaut on a shuttle mission, and also Shuttle Columbia did the mission. And also take a live chat question.
And thank you so much for the support, GunFox61, and the Space Shuttle program was an interesting one. An incredibly interesting one. A long-lasting one. Also, Matthew, is the heater on?
I don't think so. I have a heater sitting next to me with this PC that's roaring like a jet, but rather than that, I don't think so.
Man, because it's getting warm back here, man. Honestly, like I'm having to pump up the fan more and more because it's getting warm. I'm telling you, man, it's like real warm. But nevertheless, the Space Shuttle program was a very interesting one, a cool one actually, because it was the only reusable vehicle up until the Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy and the Starship that ever existed. It was the first of its kind out there in the world. A pretty cool kind of a system, pretty neat, and it is cool to know that STS-9 launched today back in history a little while ago. But I do thank you so much once again for the support, GunFox61, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to learn more and more about the days in history and at least talk about them a little bit. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and in honor of GunFox61, apparently we missed his live chat question last night, so we are going to be grabbing that one tonight. And also, sorry about that, GunFox, I think we got wrapped up in that rabbit hole last night and we forgot to grab it, so we will be grabbing it tonight. And this one, from the live chat, is going to be going to Nathan T., who said, do you think that U.S. intelligence agencies are causing some issues in Syria to disrupt Russia?
I have a feeling there probably are not, specifically with the SSG, because the SSG is so ideologically questionable that they're probably not involved with them at all. They probably are heavily involved though with the SDF and the SFA currently, and probably getting them ready to conduct their own offensive at this point to try and beat out the SSG, at least in offensive advances, which probably is happening at the moment. So I would say, as far as the SSG, there's probably no CIA involvement there at all, but with the SDF and the SFA, there probably is a good bit, although we haven't seen them conducting any offensive action, at least for now. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I thank you so much once again for the massive support in helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Duncan VR, the channel legend who puts in a $10 donation. And excuse me for that, Duncan. I am coughing tonight. I don't know what's got my lungs acting up, but thank you, Duncan, for that $10 support. He said, testing, and inshallah, baba.
And thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR. And yeah, we got it. It came through. And I got to thank you so much for the support, and inshallah. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. By the way, that's inshallah as in inshallah. But still, thank you once again. And with that, long live the Lee Spring Army, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jonathan Beatty, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Jonathan, for that support. He said, what is the USA's part of this new resurgence?
The USA's part in this new resurgence, not really there, at least for now. This is more so something being done by the SSG on their own. We really don't know who's supporting them or backing them, but there is a notable lack of any kind of real Western weaponry being provided to them. So this lets us know that American involvement in the fall of Aleppo was most likely slim to none. However, American involvement with the SDF and the SFA is high, as those are American-backed and supported groups inside of Syria. So for that reason, we probably will see that if those forces ever conduct any offensive action in the future, there will be a lot of American backing and supporting behind them. But at the moment, with the fall of Aleppo, there wasn't really any involvement in that action over the past 3 days. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to the Neighborhood Bully, who's back once again and puts in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Neighborhood Bully, for the support. Some might call Russia a neighborhood bully, but that's just the rumor on the street. But they said, thank you for the real news. I don't give a flying Walinda what Ariana Grande wore to a Waffle House. I want to know about geopolitics.
And thank you so much for the support, Neighborhood Bully. Really nice name. I do appreciate it. And thank you so much for enjoying the news. We try our best to make sure that we get real news out here on this channel every day. It's a real effort to do that because there really isn't a lot out there. And it always annoys us so much with how mainstream news companies don't put any real news or information out there. And a lot of people always say, and this used to be the old excuse for it, oh, there isn't enough news to cover in 24 hours, so they have to give a lot of filler. And I just don't believe that. After especially we've been doing it, and we've been covering news, we have 2 hours of raw, straight news with some analysis every day. And I know that a 24-hour news company could come up with plenty of news stories to cover from around every corner of the world if they were actually paying attention and doing their job. Instead, it's a lot easier for them to be really vapid and talk about things like celebrities or nothing for that matter, and so they really do that instead. But I still thank you so much for the support, Neighborhood Bully, and really enjoying this channel, because we love to know that folks like you are getting a lot of value out of it. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Keandre Graham, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Keandre, for that $5 support. He said, if the U.S. is pulled into war, will it start a draft? And how does the draft work, and who gets drafted first?
That's an interesting question. If we started a new conflict that was incredibly large and required a lot of manpower, which would be a world war, selective service, which is what it's technically called, would be activated, which applies to anyone within a specific age bracket. And how that generally works is that it's just randomly selected. So certain people with last names starting with a certain letter could be drafted. You get a letter in the mail telling you that you've been drafted by the draft board, and you have to immediately report to a map station for processing, so that way you can then be put into the armed forces. If you pass the MAPS screening, which is like your medical screening, and you're physically fit for service, you then go into the armed forces, whichever branch you were drafted into. If you are not medically fit, you're actually denied and you're sent back home. That's kind of how it works, but beyond that, it's randomized. Like, there's no way to say, this is exactly how it's going to work, and these are the groups that would go first. There's no way to know, because that is all done randomly. And so I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Adventure Camping Stone said, veterans are exempt. Not really, not exactly, because every time a veteran gets out of every time a soldier gets out of the armed forces, there's actually about a 5-year period where you're still in, technically, and they can just
the
call
reserves, I think.
I forgot. It's like the inactive reserve or something like that, but for 5 years, you can be called back into service. It can happen. A lot of people were actually called back into service for the Gulf War in Iraq, and that was something that happened. That's something that happens all the time, and that's also another interesting thing that we've always seen that really has annoyed us greatly with the hot dog man, is that he claims he served 10 years, but the truth is I think he served like 5, and then 5 of it was in the inactive reserve or something like that, which isn't technically really like serving. It's just kind of like, you know, being on notice to where if you need to be called back in, you can be. And it's like, that's a little, you know, dishonest from what we can tell. But anyways, it doesn't matter with that. You know, he's over there with like 50 people, so it doesn't really matter too much. But beyond that, you can actually be called back in if you were a veteran, if you've been out of the service for 5 years. And let's see here. I'm trying to see. It was done by lottery for the Vietnam War. That's how it's done actually every single war, because it's supposed to be randomized. It's not supposed to be like, okay, let's send everyone who's in a certain political affiliation over there now. It's not anything like that. It's always supposed to be it's supposed to be a randomized thing, so that way it's more just like you got unlucky, like, and you got drafted. That's kind of how it's supposed to be. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I see people saying it's the inactive ready reserve. That's apparently the one that the people get put into after they get out of active duty service. So I mean, that must be it. And also, I was going to address something else here. Let's see. That's right. Somebody had mentioned something about the lottery. That would really suck to win that lottery. Like, oh, look, Ma, I won the lottery. I'm going to war. It's like the only lottery that most people would ever win is the draft lottery of all things. It's kind of weird that we would do that in a lottery, actually. Like, you know, what do they do? Just like put like pieces of paper in a bin and like shake it up and take a name out or something?
I don't really know how they do it these days. I think it's like a digital randomized kind of a thing. It's just done digitally. I think that's how it works, but I'm not exactly sure. Also, I saw Gunfox61 say U.S. military contract is 8 years at a minimum. That is not true. The minimum is 4 years. You can do 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, and I think in some instances 10 years. I think they'll even sign you on longer than that if you're like goofy enough to do that. Like generally people want to do it to where they do it a few years at a time, so that way they have the option of re-enlisting. But the shortest nowadays is 4 years. The shortest it used to be was actually 2 years. You could actually sign a 2-year contract and only be in for a very short amount of time. Pretty much most of your time was taken up with training, then you were sent somewhere, and then you pretty much got out like after a year and 2 months of actual service. So I hope that addresses that fairly well, because we have talked to recruiters in the past, and the shortest contract you can get these days is 4 years. And so with that, I
think there's technically a 2-year for the Army, but they don't want to tell you about it or give it to you because they'd rather sign you up for a 4.
Hang on, Gunfox is right, including the inactive reserve part of things. It is 8 years, but at least in active service, it's the minimum is 4. So I'm sorry I misunderstood you there, Gunfox, because when you say it that way, that is correct. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Sorry for mistakenly saying that, because including those 4 years afterwards, that is true. But really, though, that isn't really serving. Like, you can say that that's 8 years, but you're not even getting paid at that point, because once your active contract is up, where you're actually working the job, and those 4 years are up, they're not paying you anymore, and you're out. Technically, you can go get a job, you can go do what you want. You're not really like just sitting around for 4 years doing nothing. But in those next 4 or 5 years, they can just call you back up at any point, you know, with a letter and say you need to report here immediately to return back to service for however long we need you. And that's just how it works. So I guess technically, but you know, not really. I don't really know. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, some people were saying, I've never heard of a 2-year contract. I actually know somebody that was in the Army on a 2-year contract. So it was a thing, at least, I think, like 40 years ago or something like that. And I think it's still a thing today, but nobody really talks about it because they prefer to sign you up for the 4 if they can get you on the 4. So I'm not really sure if it actually is still a thing, but Enforcer sounds like he's typing over there, so let's see what he can find.
Let's see. Trying to see here. Hang on, so...
Looks like Mad Jack F said it looks like maybe the 2-year contract's for the low-skill jobs only, so I don't know.
Let's see here. Military service obligation, 2 to 6 years. And then two.
Okay, so 2 does exist.
So 2-year contracts do exist. It's just that recruiters don't ever let you pick the 2-year contract, probably because they don't get the bonus. Like, that's probably the honest truth. They're like, man, I don't get a bonus for 2 years, so you got to get 4 years. Because when we were, because we actually both looked into joining the armed forces, my hopes were shot down when I was told I had scoliosis, and everyone told me there wasn't a chance in hell. So the recruiters acted like I was like broken. They were like, I don't want to play with you anymore. But with Matthew, like, they were always talking to him, and Matthew was also looking into joining the Air Force for a while after we got out of high school. But every time he talked to him, Matthew, weren't they saying like 4 years only? Like, they never gave a 2-year option.
So the Air Force was always saying 4 years, but at the same time, the Air Force really didn't talk to really anybody unless you went to speak to them, because they don't really need a whole bunch of recruits. They have plenty of people trying to join anyway. But it was the Army. I had heard some rumors that the Army recruiter was saying that there was a 2-year contract, but he never said that to me directly. But I had known of someone who got the 2-year contract, but he never confirmed it when I asked him about it. So, I think they were only pushing the 4.
Yeah, I think that was the case. I never really heard of anyone in school getting a 2-year contract. I always heard 4. And then, oh my God, man, remember that one guy who signed an 8-year contract because he was simping for the recruiter? Dead silence right there. Matthew, are you there?
Well, then it's totally dead then.
All right. Well, Matthew, do you remember that guy who signed that 8-year contract because he was simping for the recruiter?
Oh yeah, I remember that guy. That was a hell of a case there. That dude fell hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, that was terrible. I was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, how can you do this? And so I hope that kind of covers that well as far as the whole enlistment side of things.
God.
Oh God. Oh God. 1 second. Hang on. Let me try and see if I can fix it a little bit. All right. 1 second. Are you there? Hello?
I'm here now. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Oh my Lord.
Good deal, man. I tell you what, it's when you reconnected, it got better.
Oh wow, that's amazing. That's like magical right there. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I think I'm going to have to add in those new processors, Matty, that move it from 16 gigs up to 32, and see if that helps, because, Ethernet helped, and then that ought to help, hopefully. And then if that doesn't, we'll figure it out from there. But anyways,
I'm wondering, and y'all, if anybody in the chat knows anything about computers, let me know if my amateur conclusion here is actually correct. It looks like it's around the same point in the stream pretty much every night when we start experiencing the lag really bad. It's around the halfway to 70% point in the stream when we're done with it, around the 70% portion of being finished with it. And if it's my opinion, it sounds like it could be throttling of the computer. Maybe because it's getting hot over time, the longer the computer runs and does all these streaming processes, and also the Discord call and everything else required to run a stream on that one desktop. It sounds like it could be getting maybe hotter and hotter until it starts throttling the CPU, and that's when we start having problems with the Discord call. So that is my current assumption with my very amateur computer knowledge, because that seems to be the only thing to explain it.
I mean, maybe, but I just took off my headphones to try and listen to the fans. The fans are hardly revving, like, at all. Like, I have a pretty good ear to hear the fans when they're running, like, loudly whenever they're really doing something computer intensive, and they're hardly doing that right now.
Well, I mean, it could be maybe a problem with your computer not detecting it's getting hot and turning the fans on. That could be part of it.
Well, yeah, but if it's throttling itself, it would know it's getting hot.
Not necessarily, because when it throttles, it's not like a software throttling. It's just because it gets hot and it starts running processes slower and slower, and it throttles itself.
So it looks like everyone else, though, is saying that it's a RAM issue. So that means that I just need to up the RAM cards from 16 to 32, and that will probably fix the problem. We'll see. Like, I have the RAM cards just sitting here on my desk to just literally pop in and see if they work or not. So we'll just do that here probably on Monday, this upcoming Monday, and then hopefully that fixes the problem going forward, because there's a whole rigmarole as to why I can't change out my computer easily due to a whole bunch of things. Like, basically, to put it out there simply, if I change out the PC I have right now, I have to build everything from scratch that we've been doing for 3 years again. So all the intros have to be completely redone, because like, to explain it really quickly, I use a video editor called Movavi, and Movavi is a really interesting one. Like, I didn't know it at the time, like, no one judged me, because back when I started, I was literally, like, pulling up, like, top 10 video editors to use, and this showed up as being one of the easiest ones, so I got it and paid $70 for an unlimited license to it, and that's what I still use to this day. Problem is, though, is that you cannot transfer files from one Movavi to the next. It just doesn't allow it. And another thing about Movavi that is pretty interesting is that you have to get a new license for it, and it's a whole confusing thing. We tried it before back in the day to just outright replace this computer, and we could not transfer a damn thing. So that means that every single stream intro that y'all see every night would be gone for good. Like, it would have to be rebuilt from the ground up, which means that it would look entirely different. It would have entirely different music, and that's not an easy process to do, because sometimes doing just a couple of minutes of that intro can take an entire day or two to be able to do. And so it's not exactly an easy thing to fix at all. So,
but at least one thing we know for certain now, it's not the Mac. Like, I can tell you that with certainty, because right now I'm actually talking to you over a Windows PC, a pretty decently powered gaming system on Discord. So it's not even on my Mac right now that we're having the lag issues. It's now happening on a Windows PC as well. So I know it's not the Mac, thankfully, because I was really having to really fight myself to actually want to upgrade to a Windows PC or downgrade to one, in my honest opinion. And I wouldn't want to get rid of the Mac. So at least that problem has been figured out.
yeah, I would, maybe we'll see. Like, I'm going to just switch out the little memory cards in there and see if that fixes it, because it should. And then if it doesn't, we'll have to see about doing something else from there. It's just that it stresses me out a great deal when we have to talk about that, because if I get a new computer, I have to somehow, and this is what, like, gets me really stressed out even saying it, in 24 hours, because it would have to happen on a Monday, I somehow have to make brand new intros that we will use on every single stream from ever, set up OBS the way I have it right now, which took some work to get that worked out with different cards and slots and everything over time. I have to somehow transfer everything and all pieces and movable parts that I have in Movavi over to a new video editor or something like that on a new computer, which would take a while, because we did it before and it practically took all day. So if we did that, we would literally have to, like, shut down the stream for like 2 or 3 days so that way I could get it all done, because when I'm thinking about it, there's no way in hell I could do that in a single day, because some parts of that process would take about an entire day, so then I wouldn't even be able to get to making new intros and all that stuff. So not exactly a fun thing to talk about. So we're just going to upgrade the PC and see if like upgrade this PC and see if that works, and if not, then we'll have to see about upgrading the entire PC, and then maybe spending a couple of days to quite literally retool, so that way we can come back on stream and hopefully be fine. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Zed's Dead, who puts in a $6 donation. I'm very sorry to hear about Zed, but he said, I can't even hold a straight face on that one, but seriously, thank you for the support. They said, greetings from Lithuania. Your live starts at 5 a.m. local time. I guess the night shift has its perks. The work you're doing is flawless. Go LSA.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And I guess the night shift does have its perks. We're kind of working the night shift here because it's 11:35 at night over here. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, really quickly, I just saw someone before we move on to the next one. Dominic Blue said it does not have to be done in a day. Oh, it does. I'll tell you why. We run streams every day. So if y'all want an intro, if y'all want a show by the next day, it's got to be done in a day. We only get one day off. We work 6 days a week. We actually work 7. Like, we work 7 days a week. We're on air 6 days a week. So to switch out this PC with a brand new one, I've got to stop everything, at least on my end, for maybe 2 or 3 days. Like that's the minimum, because it would not be able to be done and completed in a day. So if that's the stressful thing about it, is that to keep a continuous streaming schedule and not cancel more days, which I'm not really a big fan of, because we've already canceled many days just over the past few months, and I'm not really a big fan of doing that. Like, one of them was for a vacation, and that was fine. The other thing was something else, and that was not fine with me. And I have to cancel more days to do that. Like, if we wanted to be on air the next day, which would be Tuesday, I have to get that all done on Monday, which could not happen. And then, like, the next day, I can't really get that done because it would either be my video day or I just have to cancel the video for that day and not make a short war news summary or throw it over to Matthew or something. And Matthew would also have to be helping out with setting up the new computer because I'm not really a tech savvy person. So he wouldn't be able to do anything either, probably. And then we might have some stuff put together to maybe run a live stream that night. And then there's a whole bunch of million other issues going on, like how do I make the specific cards, like, you know, the intro card, the outro cards. I have to set all that back up in OBS. I have to be able to put all that into a video editor and remake it again, and I have to find all the downloadable files that I use for that. It is a headache. Like, that would be a massive headache. So
I don't know, man. I think we better start getting prepped for it because otherwise, all their alternatives is to keep dealing with this lag, and it's a nightmare for me over here because I can barely hear a thing.
Well, we have another option, which is just upgrading the RAM cards, which I'm going to do, and then we're going to see if that works, and if it doesn't, then we'll do that. But I'm not a big fan of going through 3 days of just, you know, slogging from day in and day out trying to get streams running again, and, you know, with no real breathing room in sight for that. Like, that doesn't really sit well with me whenever we bring that up. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
I say during the 2 or 3 days when that's happening, I say just literally press the live button and no intro at all, and people will probably understand for those couple of days that we're dealing with tech issues. That would probably be fine. It would be better than not hearing anything. I can tell you that for certain. But anyways, moving on here to our next one, our next super chat. This one goes to Critical Mass X Amerifatti, LSA forever, and I love to see that X Amerifatti is in the live chat. Seriously though, thank you very much for that $10 support. They said all glory to Matt. Oh, that's what I like to hear. Save the Matt forever. He said I'm an IT pro for 25 years now and can help you all out. Take a live chat question and long live the Lunchman.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Critical Mass Ex-American Fatty. That's a pretty nice name. And also, thank you so much for offering the assistance. We might want to try and use it sometime in the future. Maybe so. But still, thank you so much once again for support. Hope that does address that well. And we will make sure to take one from the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our one from the live chat is going to go to 60 TP brr, like the A-10. But he said Sputnik reported 3 aircraft carriers from the U.S. Navy are being moved to Asia. How true is it?
I have not heard of those reports, and 3 aircraft carriers would be a lot because I think we only have about 9 operational at the moment, or 10, so that would be 30% of the carrier fleets heading to Asia. I'm not really sure if that's true or not. I would actually lean more towards that's probably untrue because we only had, I think, 2 aircraft carriers strike groups at the max in the Middle East at any one given moment, and there's literally nothing going on in Asia at the moment that would constitute having 4 carrier groups there because there's one that's always forward deployed in, I believe, Japan, that's always there. So not only would 3 be over there, there would be 4, and that's way too many for nothing to be going on. So with that, I would have to say that's probably untrue. So I hope that does address that fairly well, at least based off of my initial analysis. I might be wrong because I'm just taking a shot at the dark on logical analysis. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Let me tell you something, folks. Since we're talking about computers here for just a second, I have this Windows PC laptop sitting next to me, just randomly out of the blue. This thing will rev up like a jet engine or something and start like going berserk, like just ham over here with the fans. I don't even understand how that's possible. It's literally doing nothing except running one Discord call. So I don't even understand it. The MacBook, I'm not trying to be like a MacBook fanboy or something. I do like the MacBook, but it does have some issues here and there. You never hear the fans 1 minute in a MacBook. Like, that thing has way more processing power than this gaming PC, and it does not spool up like that. And this gaming PC is relatively new, which is the weird thing. So that's just wild to me that Windows PCs are that loud with the fans. I don't even know how it can be that loud, really. It's just like a jet. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Another American 91, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for that support, by the way. We appreciate it. And he said, LSA.
And LSA, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Another American 91, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on air tonight and making sure that we say long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to HBO Matt, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, HBO Matt, for that support. He said the AN2 from a couple of days ago was also Russian. There was no attack on the refinery that night, just friendly fire. Y'all need to correct that story.
And I thank you for the support, but from what we heard, it was attacked. That's what we have. We saw smoke coming from the refinery, and we saw it getting hit. So that's largely what we know. So thank you for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to, let's see. Do you see this one, by the way? Like, do you recognize this viewer, this user right here?
1 second. Let me try and take a look. Let's see. And which one is it? Can you like give me the color of their profile picture and a letter, maybe?
Let's see it. Do you see the spreadsheet, by the way?
I do not. I'm just on the live chat thing.
Oh, it's a 5, and it's house.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. Let's see. 1 second. Sorry. Let's see. I've seen that name before. I actually know someone with that name. So that seems fine to me.
Okay, I'm just making sure because I don't want to say anything bad on the air, so hopefully it is not bad. But we have to be very careful these days, folks, because we've been got by a couple of people in the past, and it's been close calls. But this one goes to Chung House, who puts in a 5 and says, I'm all for you guys being my whole world news source, and y'all are more than 100% credible and less biased than any TV source, and it's incredibly refreshing. And thank you very much for the kind words, by the way.
And thank you so much for the kind words, Chung. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And, of course, the support helps this thing to be possible day in and day out. So we thank you greatly for that. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to John Person, who puts in a 5 and says, DOD programmer here. He said, I'll email you to help troubleshoot this issue. And also, thank you for the offer, John, by the way. I actually know, one other DoD programmer, I've known since high school. So he's also offered his help with it, and his conclusion was generally the same as what I was saying there about the thermal throttling, or maybe the RAM. Probably not the RAM issue, probably more like the thermal throttling. But that's just his guess based on what I told him. So once again, it could be right or wrong. We'll simply have to troubleshoot and do a trial and error and see if that fixes it. I think the RAM will probably be the next thing that the enforcer tries to install, probably maybe tomorrow, and we'll have to see from there. But anyways, with that, enforcer, do you have anything to add?
It probably will not be tomorrow because I got to make a video tomorrow, but we'll see. And so with that, thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for offering your assistance. It's very kind of you. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dottie, who puts in a 3. Also, one hand on the keyboard, who puts in a 3 as well. We also have a $2 donation, which is from Mark Andre Burnett. And huge shout out to Dottie, one hand on the keyboard, and Mark for that support. And no comments to address, but we appreciate you all very much. We also have a 2 from Leora Abigail, who says, send Hot Dog Man to the front line. LMAO.
Yeah, we can't send him, but maybe one day he'll actually go over there instead of just bar hopping in Kyiv like he does pretty much for free. And so with that, thank you so much for your support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Shannon Newman, who puts in a 2 and says, boo.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, she wasn't talking about boo it. She was talking about boo it something that we were talking about during the live stream. But anyways, thank you, Shannon, for that support, and we appreciate it. And also, thank you for being a longtime channel legend as well. And we also have a $2 donation here from Yahya, who puts in that 2 and says, thanks, Enforcer Matt, and thank you to your partner, too. And thank you for the kind words also. I appreciate that. And also, Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, folks, guess what? This is one of the earliest times we've had in a very long time that we can actually get to our live chat questions on time tonight and actually get a pretty good number of them. So we are now jumping into our live chat questions here. And we have, of course, up first, the Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse code for day 1010 says, being defeated on all fronts sounds like winning to me, and long live the West and LLT. LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 1010th day of war. It's pretty impressive to see that y'all continue to get that right time and time again, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we would not be able to hear what the Morse code message is this late at night. And so a big congratulations to y'all once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here, our first live chat question, is going to go to Authorin, who says, are NATO boots on the ground a nuclear red line for Putin? Because I feel like it's inevitable.
That's certainly a red line in my opinion, because that just literally turns it into World War III. So I would assume that that's a red line that would turn it into World War III, because that's pretty much literally World War III. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I don't mean to say that like it was like a well duh kind of a thing. I was just thinking about that when I was saying it. I was like, well, that would obviously be World War III, so I don't even know why I'm analyzing that too much. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Matthew Sheffield, who says, isn't any loss of sovereign territory subject to public referendum under the Ukrainian constitution?
I would assume not. Probably not, because usually that's why these countries have elected representatives, because if stuff was thrown up to a public referendum, they wouldn't have a Rada, they would just have public referendums. So I'd assume not. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Michelonian Surname, who says, if the West doesn't arm Ukraine or at least extend NATO's nuclear umbrella, then Ukraine will develop their own, which is better because, and also he said, which is better? Is it better that we control the nukes or that Ukraine controls their own nukes?
It would be better for them to not have nukes at all. Like I can't even really work in that metric, because saying they're going to have nukes inevitably, that is a major offense to me, because that is a violation of every non-nuclear proliferation treaty out there in the world. And at that point, the United States would have to condemn and sanction Ukraine because they are producing nuclear weapons outside of treaty. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, because if I'm faced with that question, whether we give them nukes or they're going to make their own because they're going to make them anyways, I would say, what kind of a gall do they have saying that, considering they're going to be in violation of treaties, and I'd sanction them. Like, I'd hate to say that at that point, but I think that's the point where we'd have to start departing from Ukraine, as if they start threatening us with, if you don't give us nuclear weapons, we're going to make our own. Because it should be very clear to everyone at this point, they're not going to have nuclear weapons. That will never happen. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to JMP Traveler, who says, where will Assad flee to after Russia eventually falls? Where else does he have to go?
That's a good question.
China?
Yeah, I guess China, maybe? I don't know where Assad... I think Assad would kind of be just on the short end of the stick. I don't really think he'd have anywhere else to go, and I don't really think anyone in Russia would really care. Maybe? I mean, maybe they would put him in prison or something if he couldn't leave Russia, he was just stuck in Russia. Putin would certainly go to China or North Korea, one or the other. But I don't know where Assad would go. Maybe China would just take on Assad as an act of goodwill towards Putin, maybe. But at that point, what act of goodwill are they giving towards Putin? The act of goodwill they're giving is just making sure he isn't executed or put into prison for the rest of his life in Russia by letting him live in China. So I don't know where Assad would go. I guess maybe he just stays in Russia, and whatever happens to him at that point, because I can't really think of anyone who would want to take him. Let me think. Iran would take him, probably. Like, that just hit me. Iran would probably take him because they're kind of on the same page, and the Iranians have backed and supported the Assad government before. So if Russia fell, he'd probably go to Iran. That's really the only thing I could think of at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Blue Cow Dog, who says, is this the first time that Assad has fled Syria since the civil war began?
It's one of the few times I've heard of it. Let me go see if he's ever... Assad flees Syria. Let's see here. Hang on here. Let's see. I'm trying to see here. 2 days ago. Let's see. Let me go up here to Tools. And let's go to Custom Range from... We want to go from October... Let's see. Hang on. We'll just do this. From October 31st to... Let's see here. We'll just go 1/1/2001. We'll do that. So that way it's just pretty much the all-time record. So let's see here. From what I can tell, no, he's He's never actually fled Syria before. From anything I can see, everyone recently on the internet who's concerned about this is saying that he has fled from Syria, and everyone's saying that he is in Moscow and his family fled with him to the Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow. But I cannot see any records or documentation from the past saying that he ever fled Syria in similar circumstances. So it is really showing, based off of historical precedent, the situation in Syria right now is actually bad. And so with that, I hope that bad for the Assad regime, probably good for the rest of the Western world. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I can tell. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question here from the live chat goes to JR Does Stuff. And real quick, actually, hold on, JR. I'm going to get your live chat in just a minute. I think we had a super chat come in here, and it somehow did not show up in the spreadsheet. That's really weird. I just put it there. But our next super chat goes to Brickhouse, who puts in a $10 donation and says, new channel follower here, and long live the LSA. Also, if Putin rejects the incoming administration's peace plan, does he flood Ukraine with weapons or cease all funding?
We're not really sure. We didn't cover this today, but Putin actually threatened to kill the president-elect in a very not so subtle kind of a way recently. So I don't really think there's going to be any peace attempt that's seriously tried at the beginning of next year. It'll be more so just like to do it to go through the motions, and then we'll probably see the Ukrainian war support continues well on into the future until negotiating conditions are favorable. That's what we're kind of thinking at the moment. And also, thank you for being a new channel follower and really enjoying the channel. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and thank you for your first super chat ever. And I hope that addresses that the best I can, because a lot of people were really beating us over the head when we were saying the entire year this year, because we've been saying it well before November 5th even came around. We were saying it does not matter who's going to get elected. The Ukraine war is pretty much going to end up going the same way. The war will go on for probably a good while longer, even after the new president comes in January, and a lot of people didn't believe us. But now with everything going the way it is, it largely seems that that will be the case, at least for the foreseeable future. And so I hope that does address that the best I can, in my opinion. And thank you so much once again for your first super chat ever and really helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we have another super chat that just came in, and we're on to that one.
All right, and before we get to that super chat, which came in from Anaru Ball, let's grab JR Does Stuff live chat real quick. I don't want to shaft him with the live chat real quick. And JR said, the question is, do we have any idea how many S-400s that Russia has left?
We don't really know an actual public number on really any of the armored vehicles, but we're assuming that it's been slashed by at least 40% to 50% at this point. We don't have an exact number, though, so that's really a great deal of guesswork, to be entirely honest. But that would be our best guess at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well, and I hope that finally got it. I'm sorry that we missed that for a while. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Anaru Ball, who puts in a 5 and says, is Ukraine a signatory to a non-proliferation treaty?
No, they are not. It doesn't matter, though. Like, that's the kind of like the thing about that is that, and also, by the way, that's a good question. I didn't mean to like shoot that down quick, but I'll explain why it doesn't matter. The nuclear powers of the world are the only signers of the non-proliferation treaties. And the treaties say this in general. We are the countries in the world that have signed this treaty, and by our statements as nuclear powers, we're the only people who are going to have nuclear weapons. Anyone else who ever tries to develop a nuclear weapon, we are all going to, in unison, shut them down and stop them from developing a nuclear weapon. That's pretty much what the non-nuclear proliferation treaties say, and it also says that they're not going to just give nuclear weapons willy-nilly to other people. And so those treaties are supposed to be enforced seriously by everyone bilaterally or multilaterally, by every single signer of the treaty. So with this in mind, Ukraine cannot get a nuclear weapon because they're going to be in violation of a non-proliferation treaty. So that's why I'm saying they cannot have them, they cannot develop them, because Iran is also not a signer of a non-proliferation treaty, and they are still trying to work towards developing a nuclear weapon. And if everyone in the world was following the non-proliferation treaty, which they should be, and most of them do, everyone would internationally condemn and sanction the Iranians for trying to develop nuclear weapons. That actually did happen when the North Koreans tested their first nuclear weapon, is that pretty much everyone in the world sanctioned them simultaneously, and the Chinese actually backed off from supporting them for a good while because it was considered that the North Koreans had violated a non-proliferation treaty, and that was a massive issue. And so I hope that does address that fairly well, Naro Ball. Really good question. But as far as that's concerned, it doesn't really matter. We're a signer of the treaty, and as far as our actions are concerned, we cannot produce or allow another nuclear power to form just by the treaties alone. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one. And Matthew, we just had one hell of a bot come in. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I just saw it right there. That's a hell of a bot.
That's
there.
wild, right
No
there.
politics. No politics.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I've never seen a bot like that one. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here to our next live chat question. This one is going to go to Defender Marcia, LSA, who says, so there are multiple competing rebel groups in Syria. Is that right, Enforcer Matt? Whoa. Is there one group that we've been supporting or not? And yes, you are correct. There are multiple rebel groups inside of Syria. In fact, there's so many, it's kind of hard to keep up with it. But is there one group that was that we've been supporting, if I can speak tonight, for the life of me? Yes, there is. And Enforcer, which group is that?
That would actually be two. The Syrian Democratic Forces to the north, north of the Euphrates River, which their front line is highlighted in orange. So everything north of that line is Syrian Democratic Forces. And also at the Atanf garrison perimeter, we support the Syrian Free Army, the SFA, which is another faction that is also American aligned and supported. The SFA is just generally anti-Assad and wanting to create a democratic Syrian republic that actually has a democracy instead of a dictatorship like Assad currently has. The Syrian Democratic Forces also largely want the same thing, but they also want the creation of an independent Kurdish state within the area of northern Syria, largely just north of the Euphrates, kind of where they're at right now. So those are the two groups that we generally back and support inside of Syria at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Very good question, by the way. But the groups we do not support inside of Syria are the Assad regime, the SSG, the Syrian Salvation Government, and the Turks. We do not support the Turks being inside of Syria. We've actually condemned that before. But I hope that does kind of like give a lay of the land of all the different factions, and I hope that kind of lays out who's on our side and who's not on our side. And so I hope that addresses that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And our next live chat question goes to Thomas Reese, who says, what would be the consequences for Western countries developing nuclear weapons? And as some said, what about Pakistan, India, Israel, etc.?
Israel is technically an legal holder of nuclear weapons, but no one's ever really been able to confirm whether they have them or not. That's why there isn't really a major international backlash. They tested one possibly in the Pacific somewhere. Like, that's a really weird thing to talk about. It's like almost a conspiracy theory, so we really don't mention that much. No one's ever really seen them use a nuclear weapon, and none of them have ever been physically seen or found, for that matter, by inspectors to say, yep, Israel's got them, let's sanction them. So that's why they kind of get away with violating the non-proliferation treaties, because there has to be obvious proof. With North Korea, there was obvious proof because they tested a nuclear weapon at, I believe, the testing range here at Chongqing, and they also stated it on their national state media and also in an international media press release. So we did know that they tested a nuclear weapon. But as far as other countries like India and Pakistan, they are signers of the non-proliferation treaties. And let's see, who else was listed in that question, Matty? Can you tell me the other countries?
Let's see here. Let me go back to it. I actually probably deleted out the spreadsheet, so let me try to go back and grab it. Let's see here. Hold on just a second. So you said, as some said, what about Pakistan, India, and Israel?
So Pakistan and India are signers of the treaty, so they have nuclear weapons largely by international law. But Israel is the one where no one's really been able to confirm that they have them or not, and that's why every time you hear about Israeli weapons, it's not an exact number, it's always a large amount of guesswork, because no one really knows how many nuclear weapons they have, if they even really have any. We do know that they have that nuclear research reactor, which shows that they are able to create some sort of enriched weapons-grade uranium at the research reactor, and that's what lets us kind of largely know they do have a nuclear weapon. We just don't know how many of them, and we don't know how powerful they are either, for that matter. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what we know right now. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here goes to Uncovered Cube, who says, do you see any scenario that would and could lead to more peace in the Middle East? I think they just need a little peace right now, because they don't have hardly any peace peace right now in the Middle East. In fact, there's barely been any times in history where the Middle East has actually seen peace, real peace. I don't think it's ever going to happen there. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say there has been times that the Middle East has seen peace. The 60s, well, not really. Actually, you're right, Matthew. It hasn't really seen peace, has it? It hasn't really. Like, at least over the past 100 years, there's always been something going on down there.
Oh.
But anyway.
It's just lagging like this. Lagging so bad, man. I can only hear like every fourth word.
It's fine. We'll get through it tonight at least. But anyways, as far as peace in the Middle East, I would say maybe bringing it largely under the Western sphere and getting rid of warring factions like the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Assad regime would probably bring about a much greater deal of peace, because they're really the only agitating groups that exist currently in the area. So if you dealt with the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Assad regime, I think that peace would largely be a lot easier to attain in the Middle East at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to the real hot dog man, who says, could this have any negative impacts on Israel?
Not really. There wouldn't really be any negative impacts on Israel at all. To be entirely honest, it would get rid of an issue for Israel, because the Assad regime is not really friendly to Israel, but the SDF and the Syrian Free Army might be a little bit more friendlier to Israel, at least not openly hostile. And so I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Knox Date, who says, have you guys heard of another Chinese military drill close to Taiwan that's coming in a few days?
I haven't heard about that at the moment. They'll probably cross our radar here in the next 2 or 3 days or so if it is happening. But usually the joint sword exercises are really the only ones that do happen around Taiwan on a regular basis. So if this one is different than a joint sword exercise, which would have to be considering the time of year it's happening, we probably haven't heard about it yet. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to David Tablet, who said, are we assuming that what is happening in Syria is a direct result of what is happening in Russia?
Not necessarily so. We just think it really was that how would we say it? The SSG kind of just tried an offensive, major one, to see if they could restart the civil war and start gaining ground, and shockingly enough, they did. I don't really think it was because Russia was doing badly in the Ukraine war. I think it was just really that they took 4 years to rebuild their forces and get them ready for this offensive, and so once it was ready, they kicked it off just at this time, and it turns out that the Russians and the Syrians were far weaker than ever anticipated, so they obliterated the defensive forces and pretty much captured Aleppo immediately. So I would say that the collapse of Aleppo is certainly because of what is happening in Russia, but the actual offensive itself probably had nothing to do with Russia doing badly in the Ukraine war, at least from what I would understand. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Anonymous, who says, do we know whether the Syrian rebels are friendly to the West, or are they radicalized fundamentalists?
The SSG that took Aleppo, probably, if I had to take an assumption just based off of their kind of like ideological movement, is probably very anti-Western. Considering that it largely has an official state religion that's usually not a Western thing to do, and it also is sort of a dictatorship as well, and an autocratic one at that. I would assume that it probably is not friendly to Western interests, the SSG at least. The SDF and the SFA, of course, still are, but not the SSG. And so I hope that does address that the best I can. And we actually have one last super chat to grab here before we get on to the final question of the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the first ever super chat from Ryan H is a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Ryan, for that first-time support. He said, in your opinion, which country do you think would offer the best chance of survival during a nuclear war?
Switzerland.
Greenland.
Oh, I say Switzerland, because Switzerland has enough nuclear bunkers, like actual proper nuclear bunkers, to be able to support their entire civil population. There's one built into the basement of every single house in Switzerland, and not only that, the Swiss government, for some reason, is obsessed with nuclear survival. So if any country would be have a good possibility of survival through a nuclear conflict, it would be Switzerland. And on top of that, no one actually has Switzerland listed for nuclear strikes, because Switzerland does nothing. Like, that's their whole thing. They're neutral enough, they do nothing, that no one really wants to just obliterate them. So if any country would survive a nuclear conflict, it would be the Swiss, at least in my opinion. And so I hope that does answer that question very well, Ryan H. But Matthew, why did you say Greenland, of all places?
Because, I mean, look at it, man. Look at Greenland. Do you think that's going to be nuked? No, I don't think it's going to be nuked at all. In fact, who even lives in Greenland?
But there's U.S. bases here, Matthew. There's U.S. bases up here.
They're not that important, man. They don't call it just Greenland for no reason. They call it green because it's not green.
Because it's covered in ice.
Yeah, they call it. I don't know what you'd call that, really. What would you call that?
Iceland. Hey, and then Iceland, that's green. It's called Iceland.
Sorry, taken. Username's taken. Try again.
Oh, damn it. Like, but beyond that, that's crazy, man. Iceland, that's like relatively green, is called Iceland. And then Greenland, which is like covered in ice, is called Greenland. Bro, it's a scam.
Now you know something. This is a piece of history. It just came back to mind real quick. Because I saw you looking at Iceland, and it brought up something. You know the pharaohs in Egypt, right? Where'd they go? Yeah. Everybody wants to know where the hell they went when they, went their way. And they went to a place called the Faroe Islands. It's right over here next to Iceland, down here in the bottom right. You see that down there? Look at that, Faroe Islands. That's where they went.
All right, the stream's in it. That's enough. We've had enough of this.
Look, they went right here, man. It was King Tut. They all went right here. They went to Tórshavn, and they got a nice cheap hotel there at the community tavern.
Man, isn't this where they club the whales in the head with like wooden clubs or something like that?
I'm afraid I haven't heard about that. Hey, look, there's a whale sign down there, and maybe that was somewhere where they beat the whales up. Look at that. Is that a whale in that thing?
Yeah.
That's a bird.
Puffin.
What the hell? That's a puffin.
Bro, it's Hot Dog Man.
Hot Dog Man paid a visit. Hello.
Aw, man. It looks like some kind of an aquarium here. I swear the Faroe Islands is where they beat the whales in the head with clubs, like or something like that. Let me see. Yeah, it actually is. Look, see, you can see it in that picture right there.
And where? Oh man, that's cruel. Like, is that serious? They beat the whales over the head and brain them?
Yeah, they brain them. If I remember it correctly, back in the day, it was a source of food for the folks on the Faroe Islands, as well as a source of oil, because, whale blubber is filled with natural oil. So the whales, I believe they come up to spawn here at this, to breed pretty much here at this beach in the Faroe Islands. And so people would just wait out there for them to come up to shore, and then they just start clubbing them in the head and kill them. It's been a historic thing that they've done. But nowadays, of course, with many people knowing that whale populations have been decimated since the 19th and 20th centuries came around, a lot of people really aren't a fan of clubbing whales in the head and braining them. So this has kind of become a bit of an unpopular thing that they do, but I think they still do it, if I'm correct. Let me go see. Faroe Island whale. Let me just type that in, and I'm sure we'll get info on it. Whaling in the Faroe Islands. Let me see. I'm not going to show you all the Wikipedia here because there's some very interesting pictures here of the whale carcasses, but let's see here. Are caught over the course, let's see. So they catch longfin pilot whales. That's their main kind of a thing. Let's see. So wait a minute, actually they don't do it on this specific beach. They drive the herds into the beaches, into the shallow areas, so that way they can be clubbed. So that's what they do.
So how do they drive them on the water?
I don't really know. I guess with sailing boats, maybe, or something along those lines. I'm not really sure, but they drive them up on shore, pretty much like a herding dog would, and then they club them. So that's how they get them. But let's see here. It still goes on to this day, actually. It still is done. They say that it's a part of reclaiming their cultural past and history and stuff. So they still do it, but it looks like it's being regulated to where less whales are being clubbed in the head per year in the Faroe Islands than it used to be.
Yeah, they ought to like chill out with the whales. Honestly, like this is one thing I know is going to be unpopular. I don't understand why people get so sensitive about one type of animal getting killed versus another. Like for example, I obviously love whales. Like the whales are great creatures, but you know, some people are okay with like for example, you can kill a cow with no issue. Like just go kill the cow. Like nobody's like, oh whatever, kill the cow. I take get the steak. But when it comes to the whale, they're like, no, no, don't kill the whale. Like you can't kill that whale. I guess maybe because it's endangered species, but there's not every type of whale is endangered though. So I don't know. Like it's just kind of weird to me if you really think about it. We're okay with like taking some animals out like with no problem, like just whack that one and it's okay. But this other one, nah.
Well, the thing with that is that whales actually take a lot longer to breed and mature. So when people kill whales, it's something that isn't easily replaceable. Like with cattle, cattle is numerous, quite literally in the tens of millions. I believe in some around the world it's in the hundreds of millions. And there's an endless breeding effort annually that happens to pretty much replace their population figure and keep it at a stable level. With whales, however, that's not the case. Whales breed consistently, but in very small numbers. And I believe that every single gestation period, a whale can only birth another whale. It's not like something where, you know, like a cow can go through a mating season and I believe have, if I'm remembering correctly, I think a cow can actually birth several other additional, oh my lord, I'm forgetting the name. Calves. Yeah, that's what it's called. Calves over the course of its lifetime. Whales really can't do that well. One whale might be able to reproduce 2 times or 3 times over its life, and it usually takes a long period of time before each one's born. So killing them, it's really hard to replace them.
That could be a rational explanation, probably the more logical one. But I think honestly, if I had to take a stab at it, kind of like Neff said in the live chat, it's a matter of sentience, I think. Basically, it comes down to we like the whales more than we like the cows. The whales are cute, and the cows really are not cute. Also, when it comes to dogs, for example, like North Korea. Now, I don't know, man. Cows are kind of all right. But generally speaking, like most people don't say, oh, when they think of a cute animal, they don't say it like a cow. They usually say something else, like a puffin or something like that. But, you know, for example, like the yellow spits in North Korea. Everybody has an issue with them whacking the dogs because everybody thinks dogs are cute and everybody loves dogs, so don't kill the dogs. It's universally accepted like that. But with the whales, though, everybody likes the whales. They're considered smarter. They're a little bit cuter. Everybody likes the whales. So don't kill that one. It's kind of weird, though. If an animal's cute, it's got a pass to live, basically. But if it's not cute, then people are like, okay, let's whack the animal. That's fine.
Well, more so, the issue is that whales, most species of whales were driven to near extinction in the middle of the last century, and whales play a very important part in the natural ecological system of the seas. So if you kill them all off, the seas are going to be going into a rapid state of pretty much decay. That's kind of the issue with them because they eat a large amount of algae. When they die, they're a huge source of food. When they rarely die, they're a huge source of food for the local wildlife, and it keeps the ocean's ecosystems in a good stasis, you know, in the same condition it's always been. If you kill them all off, the issue with that is kind of like killing all of the wolves in North America. It could start to lead local ecosystems to go wild because there's no actual at least with the instance of the wolf, there was no instance of animal control at that point or population control on some other forms of animals. So then there was overgrazing and a whole bunch of other issues that then had to be fixed by human involvement, or you had to reintroduce wolf populations into limited areas to be able to keep some sort of population control. With the whales, it's a little bit different, but if you knock them out of the ecosystem, you just completely wipe them out to extinction, the same thing will happen in the seas, which could end up being a massive issue in its own right, because then a whole bunch of fisheries around the world can end up pretty much going under, because the whale is not there to be able to do its part in the ecosystem. Like, for example, whales eat a exceptionally large amount of krill and algae. Now, if the whales die, and of course these are different forms of whales that eat algae and such things and krill, but if you kill the whales and you kill all of them off, the krill populations are going to go out of control because there is no way to actually control them. So you get krill blooms, and then the krill blooms are going to get so big that they're going to end up killing off a large amount of other fish populations. And then when those fish populations die, the other fish that feed on those fish will also die off as well. So then it creates largely a chain reaction that goes out of control, and you see that the world's oceans are pretty much decimated because of the extinction of one key species. Like the whale is, from what we we can tell, is a keystone species of really any ecosystem in the ocean in the world. It's not like any.
So you're saying so you're saying it's more of an environmental thing, like a food chain sort of stability issue, but at the same time though, you probably would not support the eating of the dogs, I would imagine. I don't support the eating of the dogs. The dogs are very they breed fast. There's a lot of dogs out there and stuff like that, but nobody like advocates, except for like a couple of places, eating dogs. Like nobody really says, let's go eat dogs. Nobody wants to do that. And that's not really an environmental issue necessarily.
Well, I wouldn't eat a dog, but the thing is though is that being against eating a dog is more of a moral issue, because people can eat dogs in, say, Korea, and it doesn't really change the way the world turns or anything like that. Killing a whale, however, because the difference is that a dog isn't a keystone species. A dog is a domesticated pet, so it plays no real function in any natural ecosystem anywhere. So all of the dogs in the world, no matter how much I love Mr. Corgi and Shiba, could die and literally no impact would be had to local ecosystems because they're completely removed from them. But other sorts of species, like the whale or the wolf, are what's called keystone species. They're species that cannot die or cease to exist without major ecological damage. And that, of course, turns into major economical damage in the long term. Because if you kill something like the whale or the wolf, populations that those animals were keeping in control will run rampant and go out of control. So either you have to find a way on a actual industrial level to control certain animal populations through human involvement, and so you have to have a whole entire industry pop up around that and keep constant maintenance and input to keep krill populations and algae populations from going wild, or you have to find a way to reintroduce the whales or the wolves in other instances. There are species though that can just literally disappear and it would not mean a damn thing to anyone. Like, for example, if certain species of bass die, there won't really be that much of an issue because other fish species that pretty much do the same thing as the bass can take over for them. But on other ones, however, like the whale, because it's a keystone species, you can't wipe them out to extinction. Otherwise, there could be major worldwide, really economical losses in the long term if you want to look at it that way, or if you want to look at it in a more humanitarian sense, or like a tree hugger sense, there's massive ecological damage.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so. Also, by the way, not to switch topics here, because I know that's a very interesting topic for many of the. Actually, it's got a lot of people talking in the live chat, surprisingly. But are those people still around that used to like go over and like ram the Japanese whaling boats? You remember like it was those Greenpeace people or something like that?
Yeah.
Whale Wars. I can't remember what the name. I don't think it was necessarily Greenpeace. I don't think it was someone else that was going around ramming boats around Japan that were whaling. Are they still out there, or did that guy get in trouble for doing that?
I think that guy got in trouble. I think he's actually listed as like a domestic terrorist or something like that in some countries.
Oh.
But let's see here. Let's see. The last time they did that apparently was 2015. And let me see here if we can get some information here.
A Sea Shepherd, that's what it was called. Justin B said in the live chat. That was I'm not sure what the name of their organization was. I think it was like Save the Whales or something like that. I can't remember. But also, let's see. Someone said, I think he just got into jail. Oh my God. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he was ramming boats out in the ocean. So, I mean, surely that wasn't, probably wasn't legal. I don't know. But what's the status? Do you see anything?
So let's see. Whale wars ended because the Japanese fleet stopped going to the Southern Ocean to poach whales. And so that appears to be the reason why it ended. But I also believe there were additional, like, criminal and legal reasons as to why it ended. Let's see here. Let me see. Whale wars scandal. Let me see if I can find some info on that. Let's see. Hang on here. Watson's activities have led to legal action from authorities in countries including the U.S., Canada, Norway, Costa Rica, and Japan. So pretty much he has had a whole bunch of probably criminal action brought against him for probably what they would equate to piracy. I don't know the exact details, but ramming vessels on the high seas is probably some form of recklessness or piracy, most likely, that he was conducting. So probably not that good of a thing. So that's what I think happened to the guy. I'm not really sure. I'd have to look into it some more. But beyond that, though, I saw some people talking about this, and some people were like, "Wow, I didn't know about keystone species." That is something that a lot of people don't know. There was a lot of animals out there that are keystone species that you just cannot get rid of, and that's something that a lot of people have learned. Like, for example, another interesting keystone species that's being brought back in Europe is actually the European bison. A lot of people don't know this, but Europe actually had bison for a large part of their history, but they were pretty much wiped out to extinction a good while ago, and they're now being brought back. They look almost just like an American bison, but I'll explain why here in a second. It's because they are crossbred a great deal these days with American bison to stop inbreeding and also all the genetic defects that come along with it. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring back the European bison, because the European bison in pretty much the entirety of Europe, in areas that were not cultivated or farmed, were able to keep the pastures in control. But of course, you needed wolves to keep these in control as well, because they were another keystone species. And if you let the bison run rampant without any kind of population control, they will overgraze, and they'll actually end up pretty much wiping out the prairies they feed on. So then you have to bring in wolves to deal with the bison. But nevertheless, they are trying to bring these back, and they have selective breeding programs going on right now on this island, Bornholm, and I believe there's another one, Gotland, that is also happening on as well. And the eventual plan is that when the populations get large enough, they're going to start reintroducing them into uncultivated areas of Europe, which are very few and far in between these days, so that way they can manage the plains in these areas, and also reintroduce the Eurasian timber wolves into those areas as well to manage those populations. So that's also another thing as well. And it's a really interesting thing when you get into ecology, because a lot of people look at it as tree hugging, but you can also look at it in a more pragmatic sense of economical management, because a lot of people don't think about this, but if you killed something like the whale to the point that it went extinct, a lot of those fisheries that people know here in America, the ones that provide you with your tuna, your snapper, your bass, your trout that you eat at your restaurants, those fisheries are going to go under. Those businesses are going to go under. People are going to be unemployed. Those people are going to be out of jobs for good, because that industry will really not exist anymore. And in some instances, some species of fish have already been wiped out to extinction, and some of those industries have already died. Like the sardine industry, interestingly enough. That's why sardines really aren't around like they used to be, is because sardines were overfished to the point they practically ceased to exist in some areas of the world's oceans. And so that's why sardines are not really as big as they once were. It's really because there was a limited number. And also, due to that, consumer industries actually started to push people away from the sardine and onto other things like tuna to try and substitute the sardine and make sure that the demand for sardine equaled the supply, because there was no way in hell that the supply was ever going to equal the demand again from that point forward. That's
now get this though. Get this about the real quick. Returning back to the Sea Shepherd thing for a second. Guess where the guy was being detained at? Do you guess where he's being detained?
Where?
Greenland.
Really?
Yes, actually, according to, it looks like an article from The Guardian here about a month ago, it says anti-whaling activist held in Greenland appeals for political asylum in France. He's asking Emmanuel Macron for asylum in France. Apparently, he's going to get extradited back to Japan based on this article here, which is not good for him. If he gets extradited back to Japan, I'm sure they're going to try to fix him up. But let's see. It doesn't say if he's been extradited there or not, but it looks like he left that Sea Shepherd thing back in 2022, so he must have gotten some idea that he was getting in some type of trouble, and then I guess he must have left it because of that. But yeah, it looks like the guy's in some hot water.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I mean, if he goes back to Japan, they have a 99.9% conviction rate. There's no way to get out of that. He's going to prison in Japan.
Yeah, he's probably going to get locked up for a long time, and also those prisons are a bit brutal as well. But real quick, Enforcer, we do have 3 more super chats to get to that just came in. Our next one here goes to Sandra, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Sandra, for that support. She said, "Morning from the London, UK." Hey, how about that, London? And please take one from the chat and LSA all the way. And thank you, Mats, and thank you, Sandra.
And thank you so much for the support, Sandra, and being all the way from London in the UK, the biggest metropolitan area in the United Kingdom. Pretty cool, actually. But I still thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and really enjoying it, because folks like you make this thing possible and make it worthwhile to run. And so with that, Matthew, did they want a live chat?
They did want one from the live chat, and we shall grab that one right now. And this one goes to Real Hot Dog Man, who says, "Was there any news that the rebels are using tactics then Ukraine started using against Russia, drones, etc.?"
We've actually not really heard a lot about their tactics at all. They quite honestly, wiped out the first defensive line, and then the entire defensive force fell apart. So we didn't really get to see a lot of their offensive strategy because they didn't really use any. Like, they pretty much walked into Aleppo unopposed beyond the initial battle on the outskirts. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kim Ott, who puts in a 10 and says, whatever happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
The war ended. Azerbaijan won, and then Azerbaijan kicked out the Russians, which was a really weird thing. Like, that the whole way that happened was really weird, but the conflict did end, and Azerbaijan technically ended up winning it, and pretty much got back full control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region. And so I hope that does address that the best I can, at least off of what I know right now, and thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and it looks like here our last super chat of the night is going to go to HBO Matt, who puts in a 5 and says that biplane refinery fire was the normal flare stack. Multiple stones reporting of refinery guards fired on AN2. Just staying honest.
And thank you for the support, and I'll try and look into it a little bit more, but from what we had in video and picture evidence, there was smoke and fire coming from that oil refinery, which would suggest a hit. But I'll try and look into it a little bit more and see if that was the case. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are actually on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be AF Kaplan, who says, are there any signs that the people of Russia are ready to rise up against Putin's regime, given the precarious state of Russia's economy?
I would say not yet. We don't really see a lot of dissonance in Russia that becomes really unified and national in its level. It's usually just very local and sporadic. And so for this reason, I would say we don't really see the necessary conditions at the moment to create that kind of a situation, at least for now. We may see that in the future, but I'm honestly doubting it a little bit because it just doesn't really look like the Russian people are an easily moved group. They take a lot to really get going. And even then, it seems like they're really quick to be put down as well. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream at exactly 3 hours and 26 minutes in. I've got to thank everyone so much once again for watching, all 5.4 thousand people who are still here, and the 64,000 people who have watched this stream from beginning to end. I also have to give a huge shout out to the 10.2 thousand people who are here at the peak. We are always honored to be able to cover the news for each and every single one of y'all. And so with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and news from around the world, actually. Hopefully, we will be able to get the issue with the Discord call fixed, but that probably will be happening on Monday when there's time to be able to sit down and do that and then test everything out with it when we're not making videos and also getting ready for streams and everything else in between. But with that, I hope that does let y'all know, hopefully, that things will be better, maybe in the future. Hopefully, that'll fix the problem. If not, we'll have to look into it more. But with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thankfully, we have no lag during our outro segment here, so I can actually speak freely without worrying about the lag. But anyways, thank you all once again for another great stream, and at 3,100 people smacking that like button as well, and 64,000 joining us before the end of the stream. And once again, we will see you all tomorrow night on the next night of War News streaming, and I'm sure it'll be no exception, probably a very big news day once again, because things are running rampant right now around the world, and there's plenty of news to cover. So we will see you then, and in the meantime, get some rest, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, and once again, get some rest, and good night.
Yes. The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards